Welcome back, book babes, to Zarathustra Part 3. Don't click off just yet. It doesn't matter that it's Part 3 because this book is like a fucking universal treasure trove. You can start anywhere and learn good things. So, hey. After like 2.5 years in the cave, Nick and me decided to come back to the city that is called the Colorful Cow or whatever the fuck, and talk to the people about Part 3, which, we read the book like 2 years ago, and now we decided to go back into the podcast, and so we reread from Part 3, and we're hyped to talk about some good book finally.
Yes. It's been a long time. I think Zarathustra was one of the first books that we read on the podcast, and I think it was one of the ones that we were like most looking forward to doing when we started doing this, because we both had such a great experience reading the book and speaking about it together. So it's really nice, even though I think we've talked about the whole book, I think, but it's really nice that we can finally kind of get back and put this third part on wax and like actually get deep into it. It's been an absolute drought, I feel like the past like 5 recordings we've done have all just been like absolute slugs, or just kind of like not particularly like, I don't know, like super exciting. So this really feels like going back to something and like getting excited reading and like actually having the experience of like excitement and like emotional response to reading something, which I actually, to be honest, I'd almost forgotten about at this point. I was like so used to just like slogging through stuff that was like points, especially like many points reading this where I was like, oh my god, like we're back, like and I remember what I loved so much about Zarathustra, not only in like the ideas which kind of remained with me, but also just like the way that it's written and the way the ideas are carried across, and how that works together.
Yeah, there are a couple of passages we're going to highlight later, but man, the writing is just so beautiful, and it makes me like appreciate the German language once every now and then, which is nice because we read Faust for the last thing we did, and as Nick said, that was just such a drag to get through, and the language isn't particularly nice either. So I mean, if you like poetry that just drags on forever, maybe that's your thing, but nah, this is epic, guys. So maybe without further ado, ?
There's one thing that we'll also mention. We'll be getting into this in the like as we go through properly, but I read the what was his name? So obviously I read a translation. The original's in German. Mine is by Walter Kaufmann. I think it's like the Oxford translation. This isn't the original translation that I read in. The first translation, I don't have the book, so I can't confirm it. It was quite an old copy, but which I think was actually kind of better than this translation, to be honest, from my memory. But regardless, we're going to be probably discussing that quite a bit throughout this episode. How the German, which Phil read, how the original German compares to the English translations, and what we can kind of learn by contrasting the two together.
Yes. All right, guys.
Right,
it's fucking evening. We're in a good mood. I'm in a boiling hot Thailand hotel room. Let's get this shit started.
I'm in a freezing cold Tokyo apartment.
I had to turn the fan off and close the window so it wouldn't mess with the audio. And I'm just... it's getting toasty in here. Okay. The first thing I really noted down is in this second chapter in part 2, which is called Of the Face and Riddle. Something like that, maybe?
Mm-hmm. In English, it's called Of the Vision and the Riddle.
Of the Vision.
Should we start by giving a kind of very... Well, I mean, what is Zarathustra, right? What
Right,
is
okay,
this
so
story?
yeah, the macro narrative. Let me do this very briefly. So the macro narrative in Zarathustra is there's this guy. In part one, we kind of were introduced to Zarathustra as a kind of prophet and ideas of the Übermensch, the Superman, and how he went into the town and the people rejected him and all that. Then in part two, he kind of deepened his critiques of humanity. He complained about the concept of the last man, of kind of nihilism, of weak people, and we were introduced to the idea of the eternal reoccurrence. And now in part three, Zarathustra has kind of a internal struggle, and yeah, he comes to eventually embrace the eternal reoccurrence. So that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And there's always these cycles of him going into the cave and coming back out of the cave after like 10, 20 years, going back to the people, going back into the cave. And so, yeah, I think part three starts with him on a ship.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, so he's on a ship and we're going back to, I think, the town or something, slowly.
It's a place called the Blissful Islands.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, he's on this ship.
Wait, actually,
and
maybe, yeah.
Yeah, but that's the thing about this book. The macro narrative doesn't really matter. So
no, it doesn't.
It's more the small little parts. So yeah, in this,
well, he's going on a journey, and Zarathustra is going on a journey, and in some parts of this journey, there are episodes where he encounters people and scenarios which cause him to, pass on his thoughts about the world. But that's not completely necessary for like this whole thing of the book. So yes, it isn't really important what the quote unquote plot is, but the point is that Zarathustra is this prophet-like person who is basically expelling his like personal philosophy throughout this book. And as you said, yeah, in the first part it does this, second part it does this, and our third part it's mainly about this concept of eternal recurrence, which is one of Nietzsche's like central philosophy, more central ideas.
Okay. Yeah, there are a couple of ideas that he keeps circulating around the book, and then they keep coming back. So I like that in this vision and riddle chapter, we're kind of introduced very briefly, or not introduced, but he mentions three big recurring ideas. The first one being, in German, der Geist der Schwere. Could this be something like the spirit of heaviness or something like that? I don't know.
Spirit of gravity, I think, is
the spirit of gravity. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. The German sounds more like the spirit of heaviness. If you take it very literal.
That's interesting.
And I think, yeah, he has all these interesting new words. Like the book is like have neologisms. Like he just makes up words as he goes, and I think the spirit of heaviness is pretty much like nihilism. Is that, would you concur with that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So yeah, that's like a hovering little evil that's always in the back, and that will be coming back too. Then there is in this like couple lines down in the same chapter, he talks about how compassion sucks. That's like Nietzsche's favorite thing, to just rag on compassion. And we have talked in part 2 about, so 2 reasons for why compassion sucks is, first, it's just kind of like an easy virtue signal, and oftentimes when you're helping someone, it's not actually the help that benefits them, but you're exposing their weakness, you're exposing their, inability, and that actually can be more damaging than helpful sometimes. Another reason is that in German, compassion is literally means like suffering with or suffering together. And so, if you are compassionate with someone, if you're suffering with them, well, now you're just another person suffering. So what have you really accomplished here? So it's, in that sense, it's not good either. I think, Nick, you want to add something? Or?
I would say I didn't really have anything to add, and I also don't want to bring my own ideas that are not necessarily part of the text. But what I would say is that have you ever heard the expression? It's something like it's like a joy shared is, what is it? A joy shared is a joy doubled. A sad feeling shared is a sad feeling halved, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if Nietzsche specifically says anything about. Actually, I can't remember whether he says anything in part 1 and 2. Whether he says anything specifically about compassion being bad because it makes you also feel bad, or do you have do you remember any?
I know that we discussed that. I'm not sure if that's explicitly mentioned in the text, but
okay. Yeah, no,
it does explicitly talk about the virtue signaling.
Yeah, for sure. Let's carry on, and I will interject with things specifically to do with the text.
Yes, just quickly on this compassion note. Now that we've read some Ayn Rand, we've read The Fountainhead, and we're currently reading Atlas Shrugged. It's you can really very clearly see elements of this Nietzschean philosophy that carried into her philosophy, and I guess greater into libertarianism and objectivism and all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, and compassion, I think, is really he just keeps coming back and back on shitting on compassion, which makes probably no sense to your 70-year-old nice Christian uncle who just wants everyone to be happy, right? He's like, compassion is his main big deal. So why is this guy shitting on compassion so much? Is that, from this kind of new right objectivist libertarian perspective, compassion really is kind of the root of all evil, in a sense, where, if we're talking about anti-government kind of ideas and, people self-actualizing and being responsible for themselves, compassion is kind of the catalyst, or can become the catalyst for big government, for socialist types structures of society, for taking individual responsibility and freedoms away from people, all in the name of, for the greater good, and, love your neighbor and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, and I guess in although we have Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged coming out in the future, to, I guess, give a little tease, a lot of the kind of talk about compassion in the earlier parts of the book are set against this context of big government adjacent corporate alliances whose outward objective is to protect the conditions of people, but what it is really kind of just obscuring this infinite money glitch that people have figured out in these powerful spaces, and how they are actually immensely powerful organizations themselves, often much more powerful than the companies that they're kind of going after and trying to keep in check.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good example. Or in I just remember in The Fountainhead, elsewhere Tuhi, the main guy who's basically the devil, the main vehicle by which he advances his philosophy onto people is compassion. That's that's what he preaches, and that's how he gets power.
Yeah, I also kind of personally think that, compassion can be very. Compassion is in the sense of like pity, because I think compassion, at least in its use in English, it can be a very compassionate thing to tell someone straight that they're doing something that's fucking up their lives. 'Cause, like, compassion is like, I think the meaning of the word is typically like doing something, or like it's about the person's best interest, in the kind of ideal sense of the word. But this kind of like veil of compassion can also be used, and it's like it's very easy to use it to to kind of like prevent a conversation from happening. It's so easy to just like be compassionate, and then it's like, okay, then it's done, we don't have to talk about it anymore. You're doing fine. Like, someone comes to you and they say they're really upset about something, and maybe they've had like a bad day at work or whatever, or like maybe they've undergone some failing in their life, and it's just it's easy to just be like, oh, there's nothing wrong, like you did everything you could,
yeah, it's
everyone else's fault. And there is obviously a time and a place. No one wants to like there aren't many people that want to go through some huge personal failing and tell their best friend, and their best friend's like, well, I think it's entirely your fault. But
yeah,
obviously it probably depends how autistic you are, but I think most people,
sometimes
want there's again, my point is that it's not that it would be good in that situation to say that you did nothing wrong, but the compassionate thing is not always just being like, you did it, it's your fault, you're responsible, blah 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 blah, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Or in modern term, no, you're just plus sized, society is wrong. So to get that
I'd be upset if you said that to me.
No, Nick is great shape actually. Where was I going with this? Right. You mentioned a really good thing, which is the English word compassion. So the German is Mitleid, as I said before, maybe, and it's probably more closer to pity. It's like a mix between pity and like empathy, not empathy, sympathy, I guess. Yeah.
This came up in the translation.
It's kind of hard to nail this one down.
It was translated, I think, as compassion in my version, but I think there was a note which said that like compassion and pity kind of merge in German, and I mean, I don't think compassion is quite the right word for this for the translation, really, like, especially just considering how we use the word normally. But I guess it's also kind of good because it's Nietzsche's also talking about like perversions of the meaning of words, and like the perversion of the use of certain things. So maybe using compassion, because he's kind of like always accusing people and like trying to like expose, so using the word as someone might want to use it, like, oh, I'm just being compassionate, I'm just being loving. Maybe that's a strategy on the author, the translator, to try and kind of push that, like emphasize that further.
Yeah, and it's part of this whole philosophy with the hammer theme of Nietzsche's, which is also heavily carried over into Ayn Rand's writing, where it's almost provocative
100%.
on purpose, right? Like we're taking kind of beloved concepts that everyone agrees are great, and we just absolutely tore them to shreds, kind of to trigger people, but not just to invert the hierarchy per se, but sincerely expose the fakes, so to speak.
It's the kind of strategy that if you were not being convincing in your argumentation, you would look like an idiot very quickly.
Yeah. So the fact that they're pulling it off has to mean something, right?
Yes, sir.
So the next concept, immediately we get into the eternal reoccurrence, and we start out with this little parable almost. So Zarathustra meets this dwarf, which, if we could probably spend like 2 hours on debating why it's a dwarf and what that means, but let's not. And so there is a dwarf, guys. There is a dwarf. And Nick, could you take it away with the quote?
Absolutely. This is quite a long one. I was happy because we both actually selected this when we were going through. So, behold this gateway, dwarf, I went on. It has two aspects. Two paths come together here. No one has ever reached their end. This long lane behind us, it goes on for an eternity. And that long lane ahead of us, that is another eternity. They are in opposition to one another, these paths. They abut on one another. And it is here at this gateway that they come together. The name of the gateway is written above it. Moment. But if one were to follow them further and ever further and further, do you think, dwarf, that these paths would be in eternal opposition? Ever think straight lies, murmured the dwarf disdainfully. All truth is crooked. Time itself is a circle. Spirit of gravity, I said angrily, do not treat this too lightly, or I shall leave you squatting where you are, lame foot, and I have carried you high. Behold this moment, I went on. From this gateway moment, a long, eternal lane runs back, and eternity lies behind us. Must not all things that can have run already run along this lane? Must not all things that can happen have already happened, been done, run past? And if all things have been here before, what do you think of this moment, dwarf? Must not this gateway too have been here before? And are not all things bound fast together in such a way that this moment draws after it all future things, therefore draws itself too? For all things that can run must also run once again forward along this long lane. And this slow spider that creeps along in the moonlight, and this moonlight itself, and I and you at this gateway whispering together, whispering of eternal things, must we not all have been here before? And must we not return and run down that other lane out before us, down that long terrible lane? Must we not return eternally?
First of all, this is just amazing. Sorry, applause. I just thought you were talking to me, and then I realized, when the dwarf started talking back, I was like, oh, he's reading the quote. Okay. Listen, dwarf. That's how Nick usually addresses me, so I was confused. No, first of all, just what a great, creative, and really literally, or not literally, metaphorically okay. Beautiful way to describe the concept of eternity or infinity, right? Having this gateway, and then it runs eternally back there and in front of there, and then look at this gate, it says moment. It's like, damn, if you give that to like 6th graders who are studying that lim x goes to infinity shit in math class, they'd be like, oh, this kind of rocks.
I also kind of think it might be like a good kind of live, laugh, love like wall thing if you rejigged it a little bit, like over behind you is a path to eternity. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's not to shit on it, because I do think it is really beautiful. But never mind.
I have no idea what you were going for there. I was just so confused. Let's try and understand the logic here a little bit. right? So how is he getting to this conclusion of eternal reoccurrence? He looks back and says everything that has been in the past already occurred by definition. So everything that has happened already, by definition, has already happened. And then he looks at this moment and says, well, this moment in a second is going to be in the past. So this is already, this moment is going to be something that has already happened. And looking at the future, which is just going to be the past in a couple later moments, is also going to be something that has by definition already happened. So isn't this thing just a whole big fucking circle? Is that kind of it?
Yeah. I think so, yeah. So from this gateway moment, a long eternal lane runs back. Must not all things that can run have already run along this lane? Must not all things that can happen have already happened, been done, run past? That seems to be what he's getting at. So one thing that I'll preface
there's another
saying is that one thing that I'll preface with this is that I think eternal recurrence was kind of the one thing that we couldn't quite figure out when we first went through Nietzsche. And in my notes on this book, looking back to the notes from part 1 and part 2, eternal recurrence was one of those things that I feel like we didn't quite figure out. I also kind of looked at it, looked up online kind of briefly before we recorded today, and it kind of seems that a lot of other people kind of haven't really been able to fully articulate or figure out what's being said, and what it, or at least what it means for the philosophy in Zarathustra.
Yeah, I agreed that last time we read, we were kind of like, what is this? It sounds like Buddhist mumbo jumbo. It kind of sounds like rebirth and all this Hindu stuff. But when you, and at the same time, it's kind of the main thing of the book, but also no one really seems to know what it really is about. So that's a bit confusing. However, when you just read that passage, I skipped. I kind of overlooked another argument that you reiterated there, which is everything that can happen. So there's a statement about potentiality. If looking down the past, the lane of history, so to speak, it's because it is infinite, and now we can have physicists talking about the Big Bang and all that. Okay, let's just say it's so long that it might as well be infinite for all we know. That would mean that everything that has the potentiality of possibly happening, such as me dropping a glass or taking a shit or whatever, or authoritarian governments rising and democracy coming back and all that, whatever significant thing in history happens, since the past is pretty much infinite, everything that can happen pretty much already happened. And tying that in with the previous point of this moment just being the past in the future, kind of brings us to this weird wait, isn't this what's going on here? Are we? And this then opens up the jar of and okay, I'm not making sense here, but the big issue I think we had with this idea
this is a real
that
eternal conversation.
Oh my God, shut up. I think the big issue we had with this idea is if everything according to Zarathustra, or maybe not according to him just now, but he starts preaching this later in part 3, if everything really is just eternal repetition, and there's everything is bound to happen again, and you will repeat this exact life in some form, doesn't that kind of mean that you have no agency? And doesn't that kind of mean that nothing matters? And doesn't that mean nihilism? But isn't also Zarathustra's whole point to rail against nihilism and to preach self-actualization and, creating. But, what is all that creating for if everything is kind of predetermined? Like, is it predetermined? Is that what this means? Probably not. But how do we keep these concepts separate? I think that was the issue we had.
Yeah. I think it's very difficult to dissolve that idea into the general philosophy of Nietzsche. He's at many points in the book, all of the which chapter was it specifically? It's either Despisers of the Body or Afterworldsman. Oh, maybe not Afterworlds. Maybe it was Afterworldsman actually. Maybe there's a couple chapters. Afterworldsman is living your life in poverty, because it's virtuous, believing that in the afterlife you'll receive some great repayment. There are those. It's either the Spiders of the Body or maybe the Tarantulas, where he talks about. It's basically like, if you think life is so bad, just fucking kill yourself. Or if you think life has no meaning, you may as well kill yourself. And which is obviously speaks a lot to the kind of Buddhist, maybe some popular Buddhist conceptions of meaning in life, and the fact that it's there's just all this undulating, never-ending phenomena of vibrations and things that are happening in the universe, and none of it makes sense. It's monkeys on a typewriter. But this is kind of also just saying, okay, we're in this endless loop. Why can't I just be driven crazy by this? And what is my motivation to do better?
I think this idea of infinity always introduces a lot of issues that collide with other systems of values. So, for example, in the Buddhist idea, how can we at the same time have life is basically meaningless, but also all life is sacred, and you can't even kill a bug and things like that, right? So,
absolutely.
I think this infinity thing kind of breaks a lot of logic. And in my second reading, I think the conclusion I came to is that the only way any of this makes sense is if he really doesn't mean this literal. And this, and I was thinking in what sense does he really mean eternal reoccurrence? Because I don't think he's making a physics type lecture, like a fucking quantum theory, Einstein level, discussion of, actually there was no Big Bang, or maybe if there was a Big Bang before that, the world already happened and then it ended in an explosion, then that was the Big Bang, and then there's going to be another world that's exactly like this one, and we're just repeating time forever and forever, and you're going to be reborn as the same person forever. And I don't know if that's really physically the case he's trying to make here.
Right. So what do you think?
And
it
I
is?
think I'm not sure, but I think that's the only way you can make it make sense.
Well, that's a good way. That's a good place to start, right? What it isn't. I've heard, and I can't remember where I heard this from, but the more I think about it, the more that it seems like a really poor interpretation. Is that eternal recurrence is you're trapped. Whoever said it took it very literally and was saying that you're trapped in this literal cycle of life. So I think it was what this means for you is that you have to do as best as you can to reach the highest point so that you'll reach it again in your future reincarnations or something like that. it's hard. I can't really fully strongman the thing because I can't fully remember it, or at least it doesn't make sense. But I mean that also, even if that were the case, I mean if it were the case, it would be, I feel, pretty detrimental to the whole thing. But to be honest, I also think generally with Nietzsche, like there is something beyond the text and beyond the words themselves, beyond like the teachings, which I think is really important to remember about Nietzsche. It's not just about, like, in my opinion at least, it's not just about what the idea means, but it's about the experience of reading it. So, you know, his whole thing is like shock you into courage and shock you into like this feeling of like vigor about life, and I think that communicates well in his writing, in a way that, like, if you read just kind of a summary of his ideas, or if you read it through someone else telling you about it, it probably wouldn't hit you in the same way, and it maybe would just come across as a platitude. So yeah, and I have yeah. Go ahead.
I'm glad you brought that up. Two things. One, I think the experience of reading it, that could be another avenue of how to interpret this, right? So maybe it's not about like a literal Rick and Morty type fucking, oh, it's all infinity and it's parallel universes and blah 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 blah, blah. This almost like gimmicky like shit, but it's more about what can Nietzsche achieve in like how can the reader be influenced by introducing this idea in the book. And the second thing I wanted to say is about that earlier interpretation you mentioned, where you have to reach the highest point because you're gonna repeat it forever. The point, like with all this eternity stuff, the problem of course is that the current life that you're living would already be a repetition of all the previous ones. So like we have again this conflict between, oh, you have to live your best life, but at the same time you're already repeating a repetition of a repetition, so really you have no agency. And you know, you have no agency is definitely not what Nietzsche is trying to say. And I think the dwarf here at the beginning, in the part you read, you know, the dwarf responds like, all truth is bent and the time itself is a circle. And then Zarathustra gets really angry. He's like, oh, you fucking spirit of gravity, you fucking nihilist, don't make it too easy on yourself. That's not it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a good reading for sure, I feel. It's like, and maybe that kind of leans into this idea about the text itself and the way that it's written being part of the message, or part of the, not message is a wrong word, part of like the necessary part of, it's a necessary part of learning something beyond. I don't know, it sounds really hard, it's really hard to put into words, but like it's like don't simplify this thing, don't try and boil it down into something that's like that can be abstracted in the wrong way. Also, we need to introduce the Book Boys bingo cards, because this is the second episode in a row that you've talked about Rick and Morty.
Have I?
Yeah. Anyway, I have my own kind of, not theory. Pet theory is putting too much into it, but I don't really take this too seriously. But so, you know, obviously we introduced Zarathustra talking about how he's a prophet, but he would not. A prophet would be the wrong word to really describe Zarathustra, at least. Part of the whole point of part 1 is, and part 2, the beginning and end, the end and beginning of those two sections is him losing faith because he becomes a prophet and because his disciples end up hanging on his words. And part 2, when he wakes up from these bad dreams and realizes or starts to believe that his teachings are being abstracted and used for, you know, nihilistic purposes. So the kind of contradiction in reading Zarathustra is it's all about this guy that speaks, but the kind of point is to not treat him as this prophet that only speaks the truth. And so one of my thoughts when reading this is what if this was a kind of test? What if eternal recurrence actually is nonsense, but it's meant to kind of separate those who grasp Zarathustra and those that don't? And if you have like the people who make these observations like, oh, the eternal recurrence is about, you know, have to reach your highest point in your life because you're doomed to repeat that point forever, is like maybe that's a way, maybe this is like kind of a test to distinguish those who are treating him as like a prophet versus as kind of a crazy dude that comes out with some insights that might, and has a way of speaking that might invigorate you, you know.
That's an interesting theory. I've never thought about it that way. Yeah. I'll have to sit on that for a bit and come back to it, I think, when we talk about this concept again later.
Yeah, another thing.
You mentioned another.
Well, he
Go ahead.
According to Zarathustra, apparently in Ecce Homo, don't know how to pronounce it. He calls the eternal recurrence idea the fundamental idea of Zarathustra. And so it's like, is he like, I don't know. Maybe he's not being entirely honest here. Maybe that's kind of the point. But maybe it's something that we can sit on whilst we're discussing today.
Yeah, just briefly. You mentioned another interesting idea, which is that Zarathustra is this contradiction in itself. A guy that preaches to stop listening to the preachers, right? A guy that, listen, buddy, I'm going to tell you how to live your life. Stop listening to people telling you how to live your life.
Yeah.
And this makes you think, is this really, if you think of like this whole logic, this whole thing called logic, have you heard of it, Nick? All these like, you have all these you have all these technical logical fallacies that almost became like a Reddit meme at this point. Like, oh, this is fucking ad hominem. This is like, we know all those memes.
Oh yeah. Appeal to authority.
And
appeal to nature.
Yeah. So this makes me think that, is Zarathustra really a technical contradiction, or does this actually make sense? And I've thought about this because in the kind of libertarian circles and, this kind of ANCAP, how can we get rid of government? How can we achieve the libertarian society kind of thing? We keep coming back to a very similar contradiction, which is that we have to elect people like President Mitleid through the democratic process that we fundamentally reject because we don't think that someone can rule over you simply because the majority agrees. By that same mechanism, we have to, downgrade the state until it basically disappears. So the state has to be overthrown through the power of the state. And that's kind of like, Zarathustra trying to get you to self-actualize, even though he's like someone else, even though he's an external force, trying to tell you to listen to your inner force.
Right. yeah, maybe it doesn't matter that there's a contradiction for sure, and that would probably make sense because he's not like a rationalist. Like, he's clearly not a rationalist writing this like faux biblical like epic. He's not like a logic lord obsessed with there being perfection in logic and these ideas. Yeah, so fair enough. I take that point for sure. That's a good thing to bear in
Nicholas
mind.
Pimlott, level 67 logic lord. Do not cross my path.
Okay.
All right. And we went there. So now that we spent an hour talking about the first quote, maybe let's go to the second quote.
There's another thing that I wanted to. It's only a brief point. It's in the same chapter of the Vision and the Riddle. There are actually quite a few quotes, but there's one that I wanted to point out because there was an interesting snippet in the footnotes of the copy that I was reading. The dwarf disappears, and Zarathustra finds himself alone. But then he sees a man lying, and there the dog leaping, bristling, whining. Then it saw me coming, then it howled again, then it cried out. Had I ever heard a dog cry so for help? And apparently, this is a reference to Zarathustra's childhood. Apparently, his dad died in like a very similar situation, and I think there was also a dog around, and I can't get the actual annotation up, which is really annoying. But let me see if I can get it up. So yeah, this scene is a memory from Nietzsche's childhood. Nietzsche's father died following a fall, and it seems that Nietzsche was attracted to the scene by the frightened barking of a dog. He found his father lying unconscious, and perhaps the suggestion, or like one of the speculations here, is that Nietzsche at one time thought that events recurred within historical time and was troubled by the idea that he might meet the same death as his father. The idea seems to have assumed the nature of an obsession. Its origin probably lay in Nietzsche's fear of madness. Blah, 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 blah. His dad died insane. Yeah, kind of interesting.
Okay, so he has been with this for a while.
Yeah, and then following that, we have this kind of Übermensched moment where he spots a shepherd with a snake in his mouth, and he kind of eggs the shepherd on to bite the snake, and the shepherd bites the snake's neck as the snake's inside him, and the snake dies and falls out of his mouth, and he looks up. He says, "No longer a shepherd, no longer a man, a transformed being surrounded with light, laughing. Never yet on earth had any man laughed as he laughed." I feel like that's kind of a pretty Zarathustrian moment of development from your sheep to your, camel to sheep to lion thing that he talks about in part one.
Yeah, I vividly remembered this bite down the snake scene just because it's like so visually cool, but I've never really understood this part, to be honest. I like how he tries to help the guy like yank out the snake, and then he realizes trying to yank out the snake from the outside is not going to do it, and then you have to bite down on it, and he bites down on the snake, and that's how he gets rid of it. So I like that picture, but I can't do anything with it.
Well, what I would say is, like, maybe again this is kind of talking about how the words of another person can shake you out of a dangerous situation that you might find yourself in, whether that's a spiritual crisis or whether that's whether you're in physical danger. not being able to tug the snake out of the shepherd's throat, I mean, it's kind of like, how do I solve someone else's problem for them? But maybe I can egg them on. Maybe I can provide those words that motivate them to get out of this situation. In the same way that you have, like, you know, in so many other points in this book, where he's saying, you know, don't be a coward, don't do this, don't do that, kind of, don't shy away from things, etc., etc. Where you're kind of like being hit by that same dose of like this vigorous language. And because this guy did it by himself, he's actually grown because of it. He's not just been helped by being like rescued physically, but he's been motivated to do it himself.
That's fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, it seems almost too obvious, but yeah, that makes sense. It's very, very in line with all this other stuff. I have a very brief note on just the wording that I thought is cool here. So we'll have to see what this is in the English. But in this next chapter of The Sunrise, he talks about the sky as, in German, Lichtabgrund. So like a light, not crevice. Crevice, not the, like...
It's translated as abyss of light.
But that's the one. Abyss is perfect. Yeah, the light abyss. So this is again with this whole Nietzsche and like provoking and kind of inverting concepts, but still making sense at the same time. Like the Übermensch is supposed to overcome the human, so therefore he has to. He always says it's a going over, but also a going down. And we have this same duality here where he just calls the sky a light abyss. These two contrary, like light being like a great, illuminating thing, but then abyss like the dark, something that's literally down instead of up there. So yeah. I just, oh my God, I don't know how he comes up with this shit, and it's so good. That's all I have.
This whole chapter is beautiful. It's a really it's called Before Sunrise in my copy, and it's just this beautiful analogy, all about the sky and clouds that come in, mountains where you view the world, and the kind of like the how like arresting that is. He talks about one thing that I liked, the half and halfers and uncertain, hesitating, passing clouds. Hates these clouds. When he sees these clouds, he's like, and he who cannot bless shall learn to curse. This clear teaching fell to me from the dear sky. This star stands in my sky even on dark nights. So it's like, I don't know. It's just so cool. We see him like looking at the sky. He's talking about these like, these kind of weak people who are these passing clouds. They're just kind of going with the wind. They're not really imposing, but they're getting in the way of this like beautiful North Star, which he always sees in the sky.
This ties into his other concept, the many too many. Yeah. For sure. So like the unthinking, go with the flow masses that, they're not. It's not like that they're really doing anything wrong, but they get into the way of what's really great and beautiful, kind of.
Yeah.
And to take it from the other end of the perspective, like in the Fountainhead, it's kind of like how elsewhere too, he is trying to destroy greatness by just inflating the market with crap. So yeah, here the sky is being tainted by these kind of not really ugly or anything, but just very mediocre clouds. Yeah.
For sure.
So basically, kill everyone is what I'm trying to say.
Another thing, again, talking about the contradictions of Zarathustra. I'm pretty sure it's part 1. I can't remember the exact chapter, but we've spoken about this at length, about how it basically says nothing good ever happens at night, and how we had this long conversation about nighttime being associated with hedonism and things like adultery and getting drunk and making bad decisions, doing things like that can only be done at night, like robbing and stuff like that. But here, the night is like spoken about as this like point of clarity. We have this like these stars in the sky that guide him, and he even at the end of the chapter, it's like day is coming now, so we have to part. So we have this is like a love letter to the night, which is interesting because it is just a big kind of contradiction to this part 1.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess before the sunrise. Yeah, in German it's vor Sonnenaufgang. Yeah, so that would be at night,
right?
But now it's beautiful. Oh well.
So to the next the next chapter, there's a quote that I wanted to read. It's in the chapter of the virtue that makes small, and this is the first section of this chapter. And this, currently reading Atlas Shrugged, kind of
I thought of the same thing. Yeah,
thinking as I was reading it. Yeah. So Zarathustra's on the way back to his cave at this point, and he comes across a town which has a row of new houses that weren't there before. And he says, "What do these houses mean? Truly no great soul put them up as its image. Did a silly child perhaps take them out of its toy box? If only another child would put them back into its box. And these sitting rooms and bedrooms, are men able to go in and out of them? They seem to have been made for dolls, or for dainty nibblers who perhaps let others nibble with them." And Zarathustra stopped and considered. At length he said sadly, "Everything has become smaller. Everywhere I see lower doors. Anyone like me can still pass through them, but he has to stoop. Oh, when shall I return to my home where I shall no longer have to stoop, shall no longer have to stoop before the small men?" And Zarathustra sighed and gazed into the distance. So I love the imagery. Firstly, the did a silly child take them out of its toy box? If only another child would put them back. And this idea of dainty nibblers, like these kind of little mice, like sitting in their homes. And you really do like look at, especially in Wales, for example, where I'm from, old mining towns. It would basically be a brick building the size of a shed, all tens of them lay down in a strip, and you'd have whole families living in them, and it would be abject poverty. But I think the point is not actually about poverty necessarily, but it's rather about it's about ambition. And what's a important point here is that these houses are new as well. It's like this is the development. This is like the way that things are going, and the whole kind of driving backdrop of Atlas Shrugged is this kind of slow but sure degradation of ambition, and how that affects life, and how that kind of ultimately, it's kind of a cascading lowering of ambition and quality of life, and like real visceral experience of life.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting that I also thought of Atlas Shrugged at the same passage, and everything that you just mentioned. Plus, not only is it a world of deteriorating things that get smaller and smaller, it's also that Zarathustra, or in Atlas Shrugged, the creators like Hank Rearden and everyone, the great people, so to speak, they have to live in this world of small people that just get smaller and more insignificant, and you can really tell in this chapter he's kind of sick of it. I don't really want to spoil Atlas Shrugged, so we'll keep it at that. But
yeah.
So that's cool. And I have another quote from the same chapter, I think. Yep. Yeah.
I've got it here. Let me read it for you. Here I am still like a cockerel in a strange farmyard, who is pecked at even by the hens, but I am not unfriendly to these hens on that account. I am polite towards them, as towards every small vexation. To be prickly towards small things seems to me the wisdom of a hedgehog.
First of all, this is just so awesome. I love how he puts this.
It's all very economical as well, like 2 lines.
It's like the perfect, put on a mug kind of quote. I mean, maybe it's a bit long for a mug, but you know what I mean. And he expands on his concept a bit, of course, but what he's saying is that the small people, the unambitious, these insignificant little nibblers, they suck, but they're not really worth wasting our time on. We're not happy about the fact that the world is getting smaller, or that the people living in it are getting smaller, but that's not, if we spent all our time bickering about that, then what does that make us, right?
We just become this being which its whole kind of character is demonstrated by its like protective mechanism, which is these prickles on itself. It's like you're only a defender. You can't, and your whole kind of existence is about defending yourself against others rather than overcoming everything around you.
Yeah, or in modern political discourse, this is often described as the problem of the right, or the problem of conservatism, is that they think the left is wrong, and that the left has all these crazy ideas of gender and whatnot, but at the end of the day, a lot of conservatism is just being reactionary to that left, and thereby enabling it and kind of Barbara Streisand affecting it into being. So what are you really achieving at the end of the day by being reactionary? You're being a fucking hedgehog, dude.
Yep.
That Nietzsche would call you a hedgehog. So.
Yeah, 100%. I kind of thought about this a little bit. There are different points where I've been thinking about this. Not just because of Zarathustra, but because of Atlas Shrugged, and it's obviously making me think about the Fountainhead as well. In the line of work that I'm in the moment, it's negotiating your value through your contract is it's a very like person to person thing, and there are no kind of industry standards. There are no kind of like, if you're in this position, you do only this kind of job and you get paid this specific amount. But it's rather that it's kind of something that's negotiated between you and the person paying you. And I mean, there are better points to connect it to, actually, to be honest, than this one. But the kind of broad point is like, how do you deal if you're, for example, unhappy with the amount that you're being paid, or if you think that you're doing more work than you're being paid for? How much should you really let that bother you? When I think about kind of the protagonists in Ayn Rand's books, like, what would they do in a situation like that? And I don't think, because around me there are lots of people who have been in this kind of industry for much longer time, and who are kind of much more kind of disillusioned about, I'm just getting kind of thrown around, but I also don't have the confidence to really talk about these things with, and negotiate better. And so you kind of think, like, what's the whole point of even getting upset about it if you're not going to do anything about it? But at the same point, it's kind of like,
well,
I think Zarathustra would also be, and Nietzsche would also be, kind of like, you need to be appropriately courageous at the appropriate times. So it's kind of interesting to think, what is the right time to do this, and what is the reason I'm doing it? Yeah.
Yeah, well, thankfully, Atlas Shrugged addresses just that, but we're not going to talk about it because, yeah. Stay tuned for the Atlas Shrugged episode, which probably is going to be the next episode. So, yeah.
Yeah, baby.
All right. Ready for the next quote? Do you want to get us started?
Okay. Yes. To embrace modestly a little happiness that they call submission, and at the same time they are looking out for a new little happiness. Fundamentally, they want one thing most of all, that nobody shall do them harm, so they steal the march on everyone and do good to everyone. This, however, is cowardice, although it be called virtue. And when they speak harshly, these little people, I hear only in their hoarseness. Every draught, in fact, makes them hoarse. They are clever, their virtues have clever fingers, but they lack fists. Their fingers do not know how to fold into fists. For them, virtue is what makes modest and tame. With it they make the wolf into a dog, and man himself into man's best domestic animal. We have set our chairs down in the middle, that is what their smirking tells me, and as far away from dying warriors as from contented swine. This, however, is mediocrity, although it be called moderation. This
okay, so again, we're just attacking two universally thought of good things like moderation and modesty. And yeah, I mean, explaining more in detail about who are these little people, who are these small people he's talking about that live in these tiny houses. I think we all know a couple of people like this in our lives, who are basically, they're not by any means bad people. They're a bit simple, but how do I put this? Kind of following these established virtues like, modesty and moderation, and, don't raise a fist, right? He's saying they can't make a fist. They're weak. But weak doesn't mean that they're good. They're just incapable, kind of. And they put their chairs in the middle, so they compromise for the sake of compromise to make sure no one is upset. It doesn't matter if thereby we have achieved a greater outcome, or maybe one option really was a better one than the other one. No, we have to make compromise to keep everyone happy. And yeah, be modest. And, he's saying that really all of this kind of boils down to cowardice, right?
Yeah, and I think on that point as well, like you said, these aren't malicious people. There are people who will, flatly insist in almost any situation that it's not black and white, it's grey. Even, when you come to some of the most fundamental things and most everyday kind of moral quandaries, like, is it okay to kill someone? I mean, actually, that is a bit of a grey one. Let's say, is it okay to cheat on your partner? You get various kind of like justifications. One that I've heard that springs to mind is like, if you're in an abusive relationship, for example, maybe sleeping with someone is like not so bad because you're being abused, and maybe you can't really get out of the situation on something. And it's like, okay, maybe, and I would never really judge someone by the same metric if they did that. Why are you smiling?
Nick
ahead.
is like, as the abuser, I disagree.
Shut up. I can't believe you interrupted me just for that.
I'm sorry.
But I guess my point is that, it can be kind of insidious when it's like, you get people who are insistent that there's a grey mark, there's a grey line everywhere, because then it's kind of like, okay, we don't have any measure of any way of really taking accountability for anything that we do, and we have no way of really making rules for ourselves about how to live. And I just think it's such a really kind of scary, chaotic philosophy to have, where you like try to insist on everything, that there's like grayness in everything. I mean, to the same, in the same way that I think it is kind of equally scary to think of every single thing as black and white. Maybe in a way I am doing exactly what I'm criticizing here by saying that there's merit in both.
you little nibbler, you.
I'm being a nibbler.
Nick cancelled, exposed as nibbler. Nibbler confirmed.
Nibbler, fucking nibbler.
All right, can you just read the first two sentences of that quote again?
To embrace modestly a little happiness that they call submission, and at the same time they are looking out for a new little happiness. Fundamentally, they want one thing most of all, that nobody shall do them harm. So they steal a march on everyone and do good to everyone.
Yeah. So I like how he puts the main point is in the second sentence here. So, what they really want is that no one do them harm, which that kind of applies to everyone, right? That's not really, that's not really a diss on someone. If you're like, hey dude, you just don't want to, you don't want people to kill you, is that correct? Everyone would be like, yeah, that is correct. I don't want other people to harm me.
Yeah.
But the punchline is, so therefore, they go a step ahead of that outcome and are just nice to everyone. The point being, them being nice to everyone is not for the sake of being nice to someone. Like all this compassion is bullshit. The real reason is just because they don't want to be harmed by those people. And he sums that up as cowardice, right? They're just cowards. So, we have again this, we're taking down the old virtues of, love your neighbor and all that stuff by inverting a virtue into a vice, calling it cowardice. Really, your nicety, all the good you do, is because you're a coward and you don't want those people to come at you.
Yeah. Like you say, you know, the I think, yeah, I agree. The kind of incorrect reading of this would be you should seek harm and like you should provoke and you should antagonize when it's, you know, well, yeah, that you should do that. But obviously, you know, no, you shouldn't, you know, you shouldn't go out looking for fights. You shouldn't necessarily try and provoke fights. You know, you never want to be in an actual physical altercation with someone. Like that's never going to be good. But at the same point, it's like you don't want to be nice to someone that's insulting you. You don't want to be nice to someone that's antagonizing you, etc.
Yeah, don't enable the bully. Yeah, but it's funny the way you put it. It's like that could be like a subreddit in itself, like wrongly interpreted Nietzsche quotes, like seek harm. Seek harm.
Exactly.
That's a mug right there. Okay, I'm good to go to the next one.
Okay, so this is section 3 of the virtue that makes small. And when I cry, curse all the cowardly devils within you who would like to whimper and clasp their hands in worship. Then they cry, Zarathustra is godless.
Yeah, so here we're tying this a bit more to Christianity and this whole love your neighbor thing. So we've already talked about how this being nice to people can be just a mask for cowardice. And here he brings up how, you know, when he tries to call this out, when he's trying to take down this wrong niceness, this, you know, compassion as a false virtue, the reaction from the crowd, from the critics, is, oh, that's just because you're godless. You know, you can't love your neighbor because you haven't embraced the Christian love that we feel through Jesus Christ and all, you know, all that. So, you know, not to shit on Christianity here particularly, or any religion really, but yeah, that's another kind of false interpretation, I guess he mentions here, is that, you know, if you've drank the Kool-Aid, then that's gonna just be your reaction to that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's the same way that even like a secular person would say you're being cruel, you're causing a fuss, you know, just leave it. Kind of thing.
That's a great. I think atheists are much better at doing this. Actually, I'm glad you called that out. Yeah. It's like I think it's the atheist kind of, you know, like love everyone kind of. I don't know if leftist is the right word, but you know, this subculture of leftism where it's all about coddling people and, you know, listening to their feelings, you know, not that that's a bad thing per se, but, you know, till to the end of time, like, just talk about your fucking feelings forever. And yeah,
and I think also I think what is also kind of insidious about the atheist thing is that it's like this kind of diffuse, you don't really know where that kind of feeling comes from, right? Where this like idea comes from that everyone, that we should be nice to everyone, right? It's kind of assumed to be like a, you know, a universal tenet, but it's probably comes from Christianity, if we're being honest. You know, this whole love thy neighbor shit.
Maybe,
and
it does also play a big role in the Enlightenment, and so I think, you know, we just talked about Kant the other day, Kant, the German guy, Immanuel Kant. And I had to clarify. Yeah, and I think we'll read Kant eventually, and we'll come to criticize him probably as well, and talk about why in the libertarian objectivist circles he's kind of seen as a very bad influence. But again, this concept he was talking about here with modesty as cowardice is basically Kant's imperative, right? His categorical imperative, or the sometimes also reduced to the biblical golden rule of that what you don't want have people to do unto you, you shouldn't do unto them, or the inverse, the positive, that what you want people to do unto you, you should do to them. And you just kind of like, yeah, but you realize that's just cowardice, right? Like, how is cowardice a good thing?
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So I think we've all heard this, that if you don't want something bad to happen to you, you should do it to other people, because from the other person's perspective, you could be, if you generalize kind of a individual action to a group of however many people, a kind of universal rule to make sure that everyone is happy is, if you don't want to be stabbed, maybe you shouldn't also stab other people. And yeah, on a society level, now we have a society without stabbings, and isn't that great? Because that means that you as an individual within that society are also not getting stabbed. So it's it's kind of this, how do we get from individual morals to kind of group morals, and how to kind of the basic rule of human interaction, of how we should conduct ourselves. Nietzsche would come in here with his hammer, smash that to bits, and say, well, why the fuck are we glorifying cowardice? Like I'm not for stabbing people, don't get me wrong, guys, but all you're saying is we should all be cowards. That's clearly not a good thing, right?
Can you explain what's cowardly about that like golden rule?
Because your interjections are very helpful, actually. Because the act of stabbing someone, or let's say the act of not stabbing someone, in this case, that's what you shouldn't do. Or let's take a positive, maybe that's easy. Like giving someone chocolate, right? That's a nice thing to do. You give someone chocolate, they're happy, and oh, it's like Christmas, right? If you give a gift, then you'll receive a gift, and then you want to receive a gift, right? So you should give a gift as well. But now the reason for doing this quote unquote good thing, this thing that makes someone else happy, was simply motivated by you wanting that thing for yourself, or meaning that you're maybe scared of being ignored by everyone. You want to be included in the social circle. Or if we take the stabbing example again, you not wanting to be stabbed makes you also not stab other people. But really, you're not wanting to be stabbed is being scared, right? And that translates into your action of not stabbing people. So, I think it's kind of clear how that would be a cowardly reason to justify moral greatness. When Nietzsche is saying, well, of course you shouldn't stab people, but we should have other reasons for not stabbing them, right? Like maybe some theory of why life is sacred, or how, the kind of Ayn Rand Fountainhead Howard Roar kind of idea would be, by stabbing someone, I taint my own moral being, and I actually, in a selfish way, am diminishing my personal value. So that's why I shouldn't stab people. So there are many reasons why you shouldn't stab someone, but simply the golden rule, simply because you don't want to be stabbed, that's a cowardly justification. And that shouldn't be your, be all and end all of moral interaction.
I think I get a bit more what you're trying to say. Strikes me as kind of like an insular kind of like, it's a moral system that can only work in the presence of other people. obviously we are talking about like social morals. But and that's one part of it for sure. It's like treat others how you'd like to be treated. But it doesn't say anything about whether something is actually kind of bad or good. Which extends beyond just like social interactions with others. Which kind of makes you think as well, if your entire moral system is like seated in this social context, then how do you feel about things that relate to you personally? For example, like, can you betray your own self morally, or can you do something which is against your moral values that has nothing to do with other people? And if you do have a moral framework to navigate those kinds of things, then why don't they apply to this social thing as well? Or if they do, like, they surely don't apply perfectly, right? And on top of that as well, a separate point, like going back to the hedgehog metaphor, it's kind of that similar idea, I think, right? It's like your moral philosophy is predicated on the protection of yourself rather than, seeking some kind of greatness through action or standing up to someone who's doing something bad. People can see it as like a moral good to fight evil, right? But there's nothing about the golden rule which says that you ought to fight evil or ought to kind of do any kind of like, positive non-reactive thing or defensive thing, like not stabbing someone or like giving someone chocolate,
Yeah, I think in a universally talked about example of that of charity, of let's say donating money to a certain cause, like in this small people hedgehog golden rule kind of example, the reasoning would be something like, because if I was poor, I would want people to give money to me, therefore I should also donate that money to them, because as a group, you never know who it hits, who could become poor or whatever. So if we just simply all act according to that rule, everyone on average will benefit. But then you as an individual actor in this system, and this ties back into selfishness and kind of Howard Rourke as the true selfish person, and everyone else who says they are selfless, who are actually the selfish ones in a negative sense. That makes you, as someone who donates money in this scenario, you're donating simply because, if it's according to the golden rule, because you want money to be donated unto you, right? So this is it's kind of a circular reasoning almost, or it's not really, it stops becoming about helping that other person, and it just comes back to you in a way. Does that make sense?
And 100%. If we're talking kind of on small scale examples as well, it's kind of like, well, yeah, got a couple of things to say about this. You can kind of like picture, and I think we've all been in situations like this where you give someone more than they give back to you. And this can be something really simple, like giving them some chocolate, giving them some gifts, and they don't say thank you, or they don't repay you in some kind of way. Or it could be, in a situation kind of like what you're describing with like charity. It's like, imagine if you're very charitable, you give all this money to causes, and then you find yourself in harsh times, and there's no one to give you anything. How do those things make you feel They make you feel like dejected because you've tried to play this kind of, you've tried to kind of strengthen this social contract. Social contract's the wrong word. This like social, it is kind of like a contract. It's kind of like this exchange, but you haven't been paid back in the way that you expected. And the fact that produces that response of like, oh, I'm sad about this, I feel dejected about this, kind of speaks to the original deed and says that wasn't really genuine in the first place. You know, if you're kind of like, if you're upset that your chocolates didn't get recognized and the favor didn't get returned, then maybe you didn't actually want the person to enjoy the gift. You just wanted to kind of have some recognition or some return favor for it. To bring that back to connect this up, it's made me think of the Metamorphosis, which is all about this like familial contract and how, you know, once a breadwinner fails,
you're talking about Kafka, right?
Earn the bread. Kafka's The Metamorphosis, yeah. Also on the bingo card, Nick brings up Kafka, or well, one of us brings up Kafka. You know, the horror of that book is about when you can no longer provide for your family, how they lose their love for you. Yeah, and maybe that I think that point connects up actually to this quite strongly. About, yeah, it's not you know, K, it is K, right? No, K is the trial. What's that boy's name in The Metamorphosis?
Gregor Samsa.
Gregor Samsa, yeah. It's not really about his thinking like, oh, I've done so much for my family and now they don't love me anymore. But it is still kind of that. It's like a demonstration of this situation where you give and give and give, but you don't get any return. And actually, when you stop giving, you get thrown away, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think we've noticed that this is kind of a well-connected idea in this existentialism theme, and it connects back to Kant, connects back to this compassion thing. So, you know, where we keep kind of chewing on the same kind of ideas in different forms. And yeah, I think, you know, if we want to go the government route, this is also, I guess, where you get, at the end of the day, the justification for things like social health insurance and stuff, right? Like, because we're all in this together. If you want to be helped, if you're in trouble, then it's also your moral duty to pay for other people's health insurance. And all that kind of stuff. Okay, I'm ready for the next quote.
Always love your neighbour as yourselves, but first be such as love themselves. Such as love with a great love, such as love with a great contempt. Thus speaks Zarathustra, the godless.
So now, we're still chewing on this idea, but so we've named the devil by his name, love your neighbor. So we're clearly going into this Christian route as well here, and kind of attacking these old values. And you know, this made me remember the Fountainhead again. Man, they're just so connected. But yeah, isn't this kind of Howard Rourke's unspoken justification for his selfishness? Like all these people who proclaim themselves selfless, who love their neighbor, you know, more than themselves, or love their neighbor as they love themselves. You know, do they really love themselves, or are they just, you know, scared of being, you know, treated badly by society like these little people? And isn't it isn't it Howard Rourke who is truly loving himself and only living for himself, without this pretense of compassion or loving your neighbor?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the answer given in The Fountainhead is that loving yourself is kind of loving other people, or at least there's kind of this relationship between selfishness and benefit of others. Within capitalism, it's receiving money for providing things that have value to other people. But also, even if you weren't kind of speaking about capitalism specifically, you could maybe also say that if I'm not bothering you, then you're not bothering me, and that's good.
No, but I think bringing up capitalism is kind of to the point, because it's very much this Adam Smith kind of division of labor. If we all, the wealth of nations comes from the fact that we all just focus on our own shit and we're all driven by selfishness and self-interest. And because we are that way, and because we all strive for our own profit, we have to try and, go into voluntary transactions to, for our own benefit. But as a side effect, actually, that benefits everyone because of comparative advantage, because of fucking, free trade and all this great shit. So, yeah, that's kind of, it's not I don't know. Well, if you really dig into these moral quarrels, it's not a coincidence that, say, communism is an anti-capitalist worldview built also on like loving your neighbor and compassion and for the poor and all that, and like it very much goes, those two go together, and so capitalism and self-interest are kind of also tied together at the inception with Adam Smith. So okay,
yeah, absolutely.
Good. Next quote.
So, this chapter in English is called On the Mount of Olives, but we found that in the German original, it would translate maybe more appropriately to the Mountain of Oil.
Yeah, it says Ölberg, so that's literally the oil mountain. I don't know that. Apparently he was talking about olive oil, as we found out in the English translation. I don't know. Is this The Godfather 4? What's going on here? Haha.
It starts out with the quote, a line. Winter, an ill guest, sits in my house. My hands are blue from his friendly handshake.
Yeah, the only reason I made you read this is because it's beautiful, and I just love this. Like, if you wanted to like start off your story or your little chapter, and you want to introduce the fact that the season have changed and now it's winter, like, goddamn, like, how does he do it every time?
He's at it again.
Yeah, it's
goddamn.
Nice. That's all I have to say. Next quote.
All right. There's a part in the chapter of Passing By, which I wanted to read.
Go ahead.
This kind of ties back to Zarathustra the prophet and Zarathustra the guy who thinks about things and has opinions. He's making his way to his mountain still. I think again, maybe. And he comes across the gate of a great city and finds this weird little guy stood in front of it. And the guy basically he just kind of hates everything that he sees. And let me see if I can find a quote of him specifically.
Goddamn haters
Yeah.
in my cities. I will not tolerate this.
I'm
trying to carry. I'm trying to fill the gap here while Nick's looking for the quote.
So there actually aren't. I don't think there are actually any quote marks in it, which makes it really great. So thanks for that, Nietzsche. But let me just read a little bit. Here all blood flows foul and tepid and frothy through all veins. Spit upon the great city that is the great rubbish pile where all the scum froths together. Spit upon the city of flattened souls and narrow breasts, of slant eyes and sticky fingers. Upon the city of die importunate, the shameless, the ranters in writing and speech, the overheated, ambitious. Where everything rotten, disreputable, lustful, gloomy, overripe, ulcerous, conspiratorial festers together, spit upon the great city and turn back. But here Zarathustra interrupted the frothing fool and stopped his mouth. "Have done," cried Zarathustra. "Your speech and your kind have long disgusted me. Why did you live so long in the swamp that you had to become a frog and toad yourself? ... Why did you not go into the forest or plough the earth? Is the sea not full of green islands? I despise your contempt. And since you warned me, why did you not warn yourself?" I love this because it's like, don't be a hater. You know, you spend so much time around in an environment that you hate, and you grow to hate it further and further, and your whole existence becomes about hate. But you for whatever reason, whether it's cowardice or whether it's because you secretly love this hate, you never actually do anything about it. I also just love the imagery and the way that Nietzsche describes this guy, and also the way that Zarathustra responds to him, describing him like this disgusting toad.
Yeah, when you started reading that, you know,
go ahead.
I was just imagining, you know, coming from living in Japan where everything is nice and clean, back to Europe where, you know, it's Europe. There is garbage and homeless people everywhere, and you know, for the most part, I'm sure there's nice parts in Europe as well. Don't get me wrong, but it's not, you know, it's not like Japan where it's just fucking clean everywhere in public. So, yeah, you were reading it's just shit and fraud and scum everywhere, and I was like, yeah, that's how I feel getting off the plane. And then, you know, there's the Zarathustra response, which like, shut up, you fucking hater. And I was like, oh. Yeah. I guess I'm not really contributing to making it better, so yeah.
I mean, it's kind of interesting, you know, to think about this in terms of, I mean, this disconnect to libertarianism as well in a way, or just kind of general, I don't know, like, you know, Zarathustra says, "Why don't you go into the forest? Is the sea not full of green islands?" And it's like, yeah, but also, like, pretty much every inch of earth around the world is owned by a government. There is no free space, you know, and from that perspective, it's kind of like, you know, if you're really just sickened by the idea itself that, like, there are things in this world that you could never possibly own, even in any situation, it would be, you know, I just find that kind of a bit of a difficult one to reconcile. So, yeah, I think we should take a little break, and then get back into it shortly. Speak to you guys in a minute.
Alrighty.
And we are back. Welcome to the second part of part 3, Zarathustra. We were talking about haters, and about this frothing frog man sat outside the city gates saying how much he hates the city. There's another section to this that I wanted to actually ask Phil about. I wanted to learn what the German original had said, and maybe we can talk about this. So, Zarathustra speaking to the frothing fool a few lines below when he mentions the Green Islands. He says, "What then was it that started you grunting? That nobody had flattered you enough. Therefore you sat down beside this filth, so that you might have cause for much grunting." So he calls him a pig, right? And the word flattered is written in italics. And I was very curious to know what this word was in German.
Yeah, I've been trying
because I feel like it's quite a specific word.
I've been trying to find this part. Can you say again which chapter this is in, and how, like, percentage-wise, how much into it is it?
This is the chapter called Of Passing By. It's after the chapter, the mountain olives. And it's towards the latter half. The latter half is where where Zarathustra responds to this frothing fool and says, "Your speech has long disgusted me. Why don't you go back into the forest or plough the earth? Is the sea not full of green islands?" And then following that, a couple of lines down, it says, "They call you my ape, you frothing fool, but I call you my grunting pig. By grunting you are undoing even my praise of folly. What then was it that started you grunting, that nobody flattered you enough?"
Okay, got it. Yeah. First of all, the word fool, interestingly, is "na" in German, which makes sense, but it's more like a gesture. It has this connotation of a court gesture, more so than like, "Oh, you fool, you imbecile." It's not really an insult, more of a description, I think. And yeah, the word flattered here is geschmeichelt. So it's very much the literal translation. It's not much different. Yeah, flatter makes the most sense here. Yeah, to flatter someone.
What do you think is the connection here? Because it's not super obvious to me. What is it about being like he wasn't flattered enough, so that he sat down beside this filth?
Yeah, I don't know about the exact choice of flattered, but I guess this guy, being kind of more intelligent than average, let's say, right? He's smart enough to call out that this place sucks, which Zarathustra agrees with, but he's doing it in a very useless and kind of, just contributing to the negativity, kind of being a reactionary way. So yeah, maybe he doesn't have any qualities, or he doesn't bring anything to the table that is worth being flattered for, being praised for. So no one has flattered him, because there is nothing there to flatter, right? He doesn't have any plus alpha value providing to the discussion, so he simply calls out the other side as being trash.
Yeah, fair enough. It's kind of like nobody noticed me. So yeah, just to kind of cap off this section, Zarathustra says, "Your foolish teaching is harmful to me, even when you are right. And if Zarathustra's teaching were 100 times justified, you would still use my teaching falsely." And he says at the very end, "I offer you in farewell this precept, you fool. Where one can no longer love, one should pass by. Thus spoke Zarathustra, and passed by the fool in the great city."
Yeah, this is nice because we had earlier the insignificant people, the small people who are not worth our time to really shit on. And now we have this guy who is correct in his analysis, but who is not helpful, and who is also vulgar in his expression. And so he's also being passed by. He's also being ignored by Zarathustra.
Yeah. And maybe this is kind of the I kind of mentioned earlier, it's not a perfect parallel at all, but I mentioned earlier about the middlers, like the people who are all about talking about the grey of things and not the black of white, who might not actually mean any harm by it. But when you kind of get to a point where you're more maybe a bit more intelligent, or a bit more kind of have a bit more confidence in your opinions, then you can become a person who insists that there's only grey in the world. And maybe in the same sense here, it's kind of, this guy is he's not saying that there's grey in the world. That's not what he's about, but he's kind of a different level of intelligence, I guess is the right word. But he's nevertheless, he's kind of in the right direction, but he's still off the track.
I think this is perfectly analogous to Nietzsche's whole criticism of Christianity, and of God or religion to begin with. Nietzsche, famously, he wrote The Antichrist, and he's definitely not a Christian. At the same time, he calls out that, some of the virtues of Christianity they're not bad virtues in themselves. He just kind of rejects the reason why you should abide by them. And, people who simply try to destroy Christianity are going to leave a vacuum, and they're probably going to fill it with something that's much worse or much lower in quality. And in the same way here, this guy, he's just shitting on the city. He's correctly, in Nietzsche's opinion, calling out, for example, that there is no God, that God is dead. But, that's not really a triumphant thing. That doesn't really help us get to the next level, so to speak. And, I think this frustrates me a lot in these kind of, religious discussions, when you have the new atheist kind of movement, and at its worst is kind of doing this thing where they're just like, "Oh, dude, Christians are so dumb. They think there is a dude on a cloud. Like, haha, these people are so stupid. Now I'm gonna watch anime and jerk in my cereal." And it's like, okay, what have we really achieved here by calling Christians stupid? Like,
yeah. Are you really on like a higher plane of existence, or are you just kind of godless in a bad way?
Okay, cool. I think, I also noticed this passage, but I didn't really know what to do with it, as I'm glad you mentioned it. Next quote.
Cool. Okay. The next quote of substance. There are some. There are some bits.
Actually, sorry. I think this is before the next quote I was going to make you read. There is, in my book, this is on page 177, and it is the second point in the chapter Von den Abtrünnigen. Yeah, no chance of me translating that into English, sorry. I know.
really
I'm not gonna
easy
make
for
you
me.
read it. I was just gonna talk about it. I wasn't gonna make you read it. Okay, calm down, you nibbler. Okay, we've already established you as a nibbler, so why you keep nibbling at me? He
Stop being such a hedgehog.
He talks about people who have returned to God, so to speak, who have, kind of born again Christian almost, found back to their faith. And he kind of makes fun of this idea and, almost calling it infantile by saying like, oh yeah, let's all sit down again like the children and say, oh dear God, recite the poem before eating and all that kind of stuff. I think he's kind of trying to call it a danger of like, what if you had your kind of moment where you lost your faith, but because that world was just simply very scary, like for that reason, you kind of had to go back to faith. Like, it's not really, I've become an atheist, but now, I don't know, I kind of lost my community. Like, I'm not going to church anymore with all my friends. Now it's like I'm an outsider. I'm kind of in this nihilist bubble now. I've stopped dressing nice. I've stopped going out. Like, this kind of sucks. I guess I'll just go back to, I was happier under Christianity, which, that in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. You realize one philosophy of life makes you live a worse life, then maybe the other philosophy is a better philosophy, because if your life it gets better by following it, yeah, probably it's not bad. But Nietzsche here trying to be an epic, objective truth kind of making a point of like, well, we were talking about is there a God or not, and you returning to believing in God because it made you feel safe. That's really beside the point.
I'm glad that you brought this up. So I think the chapter that you're talking about is called Of the Apocalypse.
Yeah, I don't even know what that means in English.
This is directly after. Me neither. What you should have said is this chapter is the chapter directly after the chapter we just read. That would have been a really good place to start.
What did you say? Nibble, nibble,
you
nibble?
wanted to tell me. So an apostate is someone who abandons their religious or political beliefs or principles. So yeah, it's what you're talking about, right? It's this idea of becoming godless, but then because of the very spiritual crisis that becoming godless creates, you end up becoming godful again. Which is a really funny idea, and also, yeah, I mean, it speaks to kind of how difficult it is to really overcome things. It's almost like addiction or something. It's like, it's like an experience where, maybe you're never truly free, and it's always this kind of battle. And you always have to be vigilant. In the way that I actually have a quote here that I thought was really beautiful. He says, "Truly, many of them once lifted their legs like a dancer. The laughter in their wisdom beckoned to them. Then they considered, and now I have seen them bent to creep to the cross."
Cool.
It's like no one. Then they considered. They're like, you're freed from God and from these ideas, and you suddenly kind of envision the freedom that accompanies that, and you have this childlike experience. You're dancing and you're laughing, and then you consider, you're like, okay, what is the actual implication of this? Because it's not just fun and games, it's a serious kind of commitment, and it's a serious thing to take into account. And then it's like they slowly make their way back to their old ways. And this actually, I feel like this resonates with me a lot personally, because like I think I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, coming back to this book and realizing and reading again these passages that had such a big influence on me when we first read them, and such a kind of visceral impact, also kind of made me realize that in some way I think I've probably strayed from some of the things that I gained from this book so much in the beginning, or at the very least kind of maybe strayed from is too strong a word, but it's kind of reinvigorated my thinking about these ideas and kind of thinking about how I can directly apply them to what I'm experiencing in my own life right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what those things are, so I can't I can't finish that for you, but I like, good stuff, my dude. I'm sorry, I have no response.
Yeah, I mean, just that's fine. I mean, just how you conduct yourself in your life, and how life situation might change entirely, but it's always kind of like you will always find yourself in new situations, and that you have to adapt to, and you have to kind of decide your actions within. How am I gonna conduct myself in this environment? How am I gonna conduct myself around these people? What are the standards that I'm gonna set for myself? How am I going to communicate those to other people? How am I going to be critical of the things around me, etc., etc.?
Yeah, now you did actually make me think of something, which is, applying this to your personal life, I guess, and just in a greater sense, how this isn't necessarily about this, return to faith kind of thing, but you can also apply to secular modes of, what I'm trying to say, modes of being, like, let's say in like a classic kind of government, or if we don't want to talk about government, this can also be a company or whatever, but let's say there's someone who always tells you what to do, like an authority figure, and I guess it makes sense in the kind of government sense, where let's say you're a worker in a socialist system, and you always get told what to do, what to wear, like how to conduct yourself, and everyone thanks you for your contribution to the factory or whatever. And now, so the Republic falls, the People's Republic falls, and now you have capitalism. Good, you're free, run, pony. The whole world is your oyster. Go do whatever you want, and it's like, have your small business. Yeah, and it's like, a lot of people would probably go, well, I actually liked when the government told me what to do, because I don't know what the fuck to do now. So then they return to socialism, I guess, or to whatever this thing is that tells you what to do.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. Cool.
In the next chapter, the spirit of gravity. I don't know. Oh, actually, no.
Which is not. Let's not confuse people now. This is a couple chapters in the future.
Well, okay, this is gonna make even less sense, because I just realized it's not even in that chapter. At the.
Now, if we go back at 60 pages on my German edition,
shut up, nibble,
go down to paragraph 3.
At the
the line that begins with Glob und Glöber,
at the
which I don't know.
Shut up.
Sorry.
At the very end of the chapter of the 3 evils, or in German, von den 3 Bösen, he mentions very explicitly again selflessness and kind of how it sucks. And we've already discussed this thing, so I'm not gonna open this whole jar of selfishness and selflessness. But it was just kind of interesting to see him, like, and he even puts it in quotes in German, selbstlos, selfless. Just reading Ayn Rand and then coming back to this, the parallels are just so obvious. And yeah, at the Fountainhead, initially, Ayn Rand was gonna put a Nietzsche quote, I think, in the introduction to the book, but then they decided against it in the end for some reason. And there are obviously differences. She's not just repeating Nietzsche's ideas, but a lot of it is very similar, and you can kind of see how objectivism evolved from Nietzsche. Yeah, just very cool to read that in parallel. That's it.
Yeah. Cool. I can read the quote. Sham wisdom, that is what it calls all wit that slaves and old men and weary men affect, and especially the whole bad raving over clever priest foolishness, and to ill use selfishness, precisely that has been virtue and called virtue, and selfless, that is what, with good reason, all these world-weary cowards and cross-spiders wish to be. But now the day, the transformation, the sword of judgment, the great noontide comes to them all. Then many things shall be revealed, and he who declares the ego healthy and holy and selfishness glorious, truly he, a prophet, declares too what he knows. Behold, it comes, it is near, the great noontide.
Yeah, interesting. So in German it's just der große Mittag, which is just the great noon.
Right.
Yeah, I wonder, because he always uses this analogy of a day. He goes through like yes, multiple phases in this kind of Zarathustra arc of becoming. Are the night, the moment before dawn, and all this. And now we're at noon. So we stay with this analogy, and I guess because the word noon doesn't like in German it's Mittag. It literally is midday. So in English, if you use the word noon, it doesn't really bring this word day into it. So I guess they included tide to make it more of a like, oh, this is going to be a sweeping change. But yeah, I don't think the great noontide actually appears in part 3, right? I think it's in part 4, so it's being hyped up here.
Right. Just before we go on, there's a quote that I actually wanted to go back to. Not back to, a quote that I wanted to go to, which is further back in the book, which we missed. I just realized we hadn't talked about it, but I really wanted to mention it because it connects to Faust, I think. It's the end of the chapter of involuntary bliss. And it's pretty early in the part 3. The quote goes as follows. As the jealous man thrusts his best beloved from him, tender even in his hardness, thus do I thrust this blissful hour from me. Away from you, blissful hour. With you there came to me an involuntary bliss. Stand here ready for my deepest pain. You came out of season. Away with you, blissful hour. Rather take shelter yonder with my children. Hurry and bless them before evening with my happiness. Their evening already approaches. The sun is sinking. Away, my happiness. So, again, we have this connection to passing of time, day and night, and specifically these like moments between day and night, where the sun's coming out, the sun's going away, but also this blissful hour. Is this not exactly Faust's crucial moment? like where this is the moment that the moment so fair, don't leave me moment kind of thing, which led to him dying at the end of part 2.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously Goethe is before Nietzsche, so I'm sure Nietzsche being very well read must have been very familiar with Faust, and I'm sure being Nietzsche, he absolutely hated it. So I don't have anything to add to your point specifically, but I'm sure if you go out there and look for it, there are lots of probably Nietzsche's writings on Goethe, I'm sure, and I'll dig them up for our part 4 recording.
Yeah. I did come across some mention of Goethe when looking up some stuff to talk about. Apparently he was a big fan of Goethe as a person, maybe. Which maybe kind of makes sense, kind of giving, he's got this very kind of like, multifaceted character, huge accomplishments throughout his life. Wrote a book that is still infuriating people today.
I'm sure it's like Nietzsche's relationships to all people he admires, like Schopenhauer and Wagner, that he absolutely loves them until he realizes that Nietzsche is only happy at absolute perfection. So then he dedicates his life to writing hate fan fiction.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess it's people that challenge him as well.
Tying it back to the small people.
Love your enemy kind of thing.
If they weren't, he wouldn't be hating on them if they weren't worth his attention. If he really didn't like them, then he wouldn't even be talking about them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point.
I wanted to just briefly mention that because we were on this subject of loving your neighbor in this other chapter a bit further, the spirit of gravity. He discusses another facet of why loving your neighbor could be criticized, which I think this is in point 2. That, and in German this is called Umherschweifen, which is, in Japanese might be something like chuto hampa, or like being just kind of like drifting, not really sticking to one thing, being kind of a, like, one of those clouds in the sky that's not really uncommitted. Is that what it's called in English, in its translation?
Oh, you would say like half-assing something.
Yes, but I'm curious if we can find this. So this is like, in point 2, it's like the 5th or 6th paragraph down. He mentioned specifically loving your neighbor and calls it, Yep.
I have it here. I've actually got it highlighted myself. It says, one must learn to love oneself with a sound and healthy love, so that one may endure it with oneself and not go roaming about. Thus do I teach. Such roaming about calls itself love of one's neighbour. These words have been up to now the best for lying and dissembling, and especially for those who are oppressive to everybody.
Yeah, that is okay, interesting. Section? Roaming about, okay. And then what did it end on oppressing everybody?
These words have been up to now the best for lying and dissembling, and especially for those who are oppressive to everybody.
Okay, so the German is die aller Welt schwer fielen, which literally would mean that became heavy to the world. So that's a bit different. I was kind of surprised to hear that it's translated as becoming oppressive to everybody. I guess if you're heavy, you are oppressing someone by like sitting on them, like literally.
Yeah. Dragging people down, right? It's maybe heavy to the world, oppressive to everybody. Oppressive to everybody doesn't. So
yeah, this loving your neighbor, this beloved idea that Nietzsche is smashing to bits, or according to everything we've said so far of how it could be badly motivated, how it could be cowardly, we're adding another slur to this virtue by calling it roaming. Yeah, by calling it roaming about. You're just uncommitted. You don't really have any other thing to identify yourself with, so you might as well just go with the flow. Okay. Next quote.
Cool.
Don't put on chapstick, my chap.
Let me chap up.
It's the best part of the podcast where no one can see when you talk about something. All right, just read the quote.
It's just a couple chaps, mate. Couple chaps. There's a quote that I wanted to read just before we get onto the next chapter, which is one of the most the big kind of culmination chapter of this.
Good. We're only 2 hours in.
It's in the spirit of in the spirit of gravity. There's also a little bit further on which says, "Man is difficult to discover, most of all to himself. The spirit often tells lies about the soul. The spirit of gravity is the cause of that. But he has discovered himself who says, 'This is my good and evil.' He has silenced thereby the mole and dwarves who say, 'Good for all, evil for all.' Truly, I dislike also those who call everything good, and this world the best of all. I call such people the all-contented. All-contentedness that knows how to taste everything, that is not the best taste. I honour the obstinate, fastidious tongues and stomachs that have learned to say aye and yes and no. But to chew and digest everything, that is to have a really swinish nature, always to say yeah, only the ass and those like him have learned that." Again, it's just, I love this like muscular Nietzschean writing and the message behind it, which is basically, learn to say no to things, and when you can, you really know what you love and you really know what you don't. But if you're just if you're of this mind, or even of this kind of breed of thinking which can't discern these things, then you're just kind of like a baby that doesn't really have any thought about the world, and almost like kind of is gluttonous but without appreciation, and consumes but without appreciating life. And so he manages to kind of like navigate this problem, I guess, of like, we have this like, what does it mean to really appreciate life? Like, is it just about pure hedonism? Like, can we find like pleasure and meaning in life through that? Or is it through like asceticism, where we just deny ourselves pleasure? And he's kind of like, his answer seems to be, it's not about choosing one of those sides, but it's rather about just knowing what you want, and that there being like infinite pleasure in that, I guess. It's one of the things that I really like about Nietzsche is he's not like, even though he's like very strong with his language, he's kind of almost not really even really moralistic, like in the way that like, and maybe in just the way that we normally think about it in, it's kind of like, there's something wrong with him. There's something that he finds wrong about like not appreciating life, or not like living it fully in some kind of way. And not living it fully can be, you know, over consuming and not appreciating, and not knowing what you like and don't like. And another could be, you know, being too like ascetic with how you like approach things in the world.
Yeah, you reminded me, this is really a sub problem of the greater problem of just categorization, or like just simply selecting one thing over another. Like you have to say no to some things in order to really say yes to other things. Like there's only a finite amount of time, a finite amount of choices we can make, so you have to select some over others. And you know, saying no, being negative in that way, denying some things, you know, is really a necessary and a good thing. And this is so, without naming anyone, someone around me is in a situation where they want to go into a career that doesn't involve college, or like graduating college doesn't contribute to that at all. You know, so they talked to their parents and they were like, I'm going to graduate college, but I'm really not looking for the regular kind of career. In Japan, it's called shukatsu. This, like, you know, you apply to big companies and then you just kind of go with the best company, not because it's like necessarily a specific job that you want, but because it's like a good company and, you know, it'll help your career and whatever. And they talked to their parents and they were like, yo, I'm going to finish college because I committed to that, but I'm going to go into this other career. And, you know, their parents' reaction was kind of like, but why would you restrict your choices? I just can't understand why you would restrict your choices like that. And it's like, well, what the fuck else am I going to do? Like, in order to choose one thing, I'm going to have to, like, not choose all those other things. Like, you know, it's just kind of, you can't, it's this Jordan Peterson graph of like, I think this has become like a meme almost online, but, you know, Jordan Peterson talking about Peter Pan and how when you're young, you have infinite potential, but no skills. But as you get older, and this is the Peter Pan story, you get, you lose potential. There's less things that you can, you know, become, but you actually gain skills. And the really ugly situation is when you become old, but you didn't commit to anything. So now you have no potential and no skills, and you're 30 in your mom's basement, right? So, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, guys, you have to deny things in order to love other things.
Yeah. And again, this kind of fits into the whole kind of courage versus cowardice situation, where it's like, you know, what way do you really want to move through your life? Do you want to be like always defensive, always trying to keep options open for escape, which are really options for escape rather than anything else, right? It's like you don't want to keep your options open so you can, you can not have to commit to something that might scare you a little bit, versus what Nietzsche would probably think of as the ideal approach, which is you smash through everything, and, you know, you go through this one thing, you put everything into it, and if it ends up disgusting you, if you end up hating it, if it's not doing, if it's not bringing you meaning in the way that you might have thought it would, you move on and you keep that momentum going through, which is such a uplifting, like, proper Zarathustra message, I think. You know, when people talk about no regrets and stuff in the context of, like, you know, getting a tattoo, or you know, even just like spending nights, like going out partying or whatever. And I do love a part. I love to let loose and whatever. But it's funny how it's like the thing with Nietzsche is it's really like it's not no regrets. Like I'm gonna not regret doing something stupid. It's not even about regret. It's not even about thinking about that. It's like it is purely just like always moving forward and not thinking about even that kind of possibility.
Nietzsche's no regrets is like, hey, YOLO, man, no regrets. Go out there and learn how to code and read a book on coding for 20 hours plus and do not party. I don't know. It's more like committing to a specific thing.
Yes. Yeah. It's about committing. Yeah.
Okay. One last thing on that note. Like, I think in this discussion of like relationships and marriage and all that, like, I think there are many good reasons for getting and also not getting married, and it really depends on the individual circumstances. But I think in a conventional kind of relationship setting, maybe especially if there is not a lot of good communication going on between the two, if you've been dating, let's say for like 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and you're like, and you're still just dating, and it's not really addressed why you're not getting married. I think it tends to be interpreted as you said, leaving your options open. Like, there's no real reason why I wouldn't get married to you. It's just, why would I restrict my options? And that is kind of a statement. Like, I guess I don't want to really be with you forever, do I? Like, it's kind of a hesitation that, in a sense, yeah, by getting married, you simply reduce your options. You simply have one less path than you would have had otherwise. So in a way, you could logic it out to mean like, clearly the life where I have two options is better than the life where I have one option. But not committing to that one option maybe means that you don't really have any options. Maybe you're just half-assing both of them now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Because it's like, you still be in a relationship which is like limited your options. It's not like you're like in a relationship sleeping around, but then you're also kind of like leaving the door open for things to break away.
Murphy's Law says they will.
Yeah, so that's yeah. That's definitely a good connection to make here.
So I think
so let's move on to.
I'm in Thailand right now in this hotel. I think there's like animals screaming outside. I wonder if this picks up on the microphone. I don't know why. Same time last night at like 10:30. It's just like screaming animal sounds.
Really, I can hear a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, we'll just have to deal with that. Sorry.
Maybe it's just the pigs, foaming pigs, complaining about Thailand. Nah, we love Thailand. The king of Thailand.
All right, just read the next quote.
We all love him. Shut up. I'm not your fucking monkey. All right, I'll read the next quote. So we're in the next chapter called Of Old and New Law Tables. And this chapter is the longest chapter in part 3, maybe one of the longest in the book. Has 26, 30 sections or something. It's kind of weirdly structured, but they're all kind of like, a lot of them are kind of like self-enclosed little lessons, I guess. So Phil's got a bunch of quotes. I'm going to read them out here. We'll start with the first one. Here I sit and wait. Old shattered law tables around me, and also new, half-written law tables. When will my hour come? The hour of my down-going, my descent. For I want to go. For I want to go to men For I want to go to men once more. For that I now wait. For first the sign that it is my hour must come to me, namely the laughing lion with the flock of doves. Meanwhile I talk to myself as one who has plenty of time. No one tells me anything new, so I tell myself to myself. When I visited men, I found them sitting upon an old self-conceit. Each one thought he had long since known what was good and evil for man. All talk of virtue seemed to them an ancient, wearied affair, and he who wished to sleep well spoke of good and evil before retiring. I disturbed this somnolence when I heard that nobody yet knows what is good and evil unless it be the Creator. But he it is who creates a goal for mankind and gives the earth its meaning and its future. He it is who creates the quality of good and evil in things.
Okay, first of all, I'm interested to hear that they call it law tables in the English translation. In German, it says Tafeln. Yeah. So yeah, literally tables. But the context it is in kind of makes you imagine like a slab of stone, like kind of the one that Moses wrote the 10 Commandments on.
Right.
And so now breaking these tables, it's kind of feels like he's literally taken the 10 Commandments or something, smashing them and trying to write new ones. Yeah, interesting. Law tables. I don't know. Hammurabi Code.
Table, yeah, like it.
Yeah.
Tablet, I guess, is like.
Okay, but the real reason I wanted to talk about this quote
law table
is he mentions that the creator, he who creates, is really the one who creates good and evil. Did I get that right on the last sentence there? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's talking.
So yeah, I actually had these two last paragraphs highlighted myself. I disturbed this somnolence when I taught that nobody yet knows what is good and evil unless it be the Creator. But he it is who creates a goal for mankind and gives the earth its meaning and its future. He it is who creates the quality of good and evil in things.
Yeah, so first of all, again, this is very like Fountainhead. This is very, the creator versus the, what was it? I've already forgot the term, but like the creator versus the consumer, I guess. But also tying this into breaking all these old tables, he's saying in all these old moral system, be it Christianity or whatever, we have a lot of talk of good and evil, what is right and what is wrong. But, it's really, the concept itself comes from the creator. Like it is a concept that is created. And so in this Christian perspective, I guess it makes sense, if you think like, oh, God created the earth, God created man, God created morality, and he created good and evil, so to speak. He created day and night. But obviously, Nietzsche is not moving within that Christian framework. So, yeah, we just kind of come back, because it's the introduction of this long chapter, right? So we just come back to this outset of, in order to create new values, we have to deal with this good and evil thing, because really all values are kind of on a sliding scale of from good to evil. Otherwise, what's the point, right? We can't, if we create new values but they're all equally good, then that's not really helpful. We gotta kind of have a hierarchy of values, and we have to create that one as well, which is the real challenge, I guess.
Yeah, cool. Nothing to add. Sounds good to me.
Sorry, that's all I have.
I want to read the first 2 paragraphs from section 3. There it was too that I picked up the word Superman, and that man is something that must be overcome. That man is a bridge and not a goal, counting himself happy for his noontides and evenings as a way to new dawns. This idea of man as a bridge, not a goal, is obviously an essential part of the whole Übermensch idea, and I think is important to bear in mind as we're talking in part 3. Again, it's like a contradiction, a little bit. It's like, what's the point in constantly striving towards this goal, I guess, is the first question, but also kind of like, the purpose of using ideals as a means to kind of live life, when we know that these ideals are things that we can never actually truly reach. And as well, we also have this like reference to evenings and dawns, and it's funny because I feel like I didn't pick up on how present this was in the book, like the first time we read it, but talking about it today, it's like this is everywhere. This whole idea of like cycles of day and night, and how they're actually part of growth.
And this ties into the eternal reoccurrence, right? Like after every day comes
absolutely, yeah,
night again, and then blah blah blah, and another noontide. And he goes later in a quote we're probably going to read, he mentions that specifically as well. Okay, I want to talk about point 11 in this chapter, which really I think is one of the juiciest ones overall, because he does some epic Nietzschean forecasting of the future, like only Nietzsche could.
So, my pity for all that is past is that I see it has been handed over to the favor, the spirit, the madness of every generation that comes and transforms everything that has been into its own bridge. A great despot could come, a shrewd devil, who with his favor and disfavor could compel and constrain all that is past, until it became his bridge and prognostic and herald and cockcrow. This, however, is the other danger and my other pity. He who is of the mob remembers back to his grandfather. With his grandfather, however, time stops. Thus all that is past is handed over, for the mob could only one day become master, and all time be drowned in shallow waters. Therefore, O my brothers, is a new nobility needed, to oppose all mob rule and all despotism, and to write anew upon new law tables the word noble. For many noblemen are needed, and noblemen of many kinds, for nobility to exist, or as I once said in a parable, precisely this is godliness, that there are gods but no God.
Epic, so there's...
Just to clarify, God is capital G, that last God.
I love this because we have kind of a perfect trinity of systems of government or whatever. Like first he mentions the despot who uses the past, who bends the past to his will, and who in German it's called Gewaltherr, so literally a violent leader. It feels very analogous to Führer actually. And so, this is literally like the authoritarian right. I guess this is Hitler, and this is this great Nietzschean forecasting of what is to come. Like on the one hand, we have this military type leader, despot guy who, bends the past to become his like kind of evil bridge to the future. So this is Hitler taking the Greeks and like all that old like art, the Greeks and the Romans, and just like using all this imagery of strength and I guess masculinity and Aryanism and whatever, and like using all this past depiction of, and also gymnastics to make it like a twisted version of, what he's trying to build. On the other side that Nietzsche worries, he has the opposite. He has the mob, in German, der Pöbel. So this is kind of like, it's not just the mob, it's like the lowly, the lowest like social class. What if they become the despot? And their memory only goes back to their grandfather, so they can, like, they basically erase history. And I mean, this is communism, right? This is Mao, this is Stalin, this is all that, like literally erasing history. And in North Korea, people actually don't know what happened before their grandfather lived and literally became reality. And finally, he says, we need a new aristocracy. And really, in German, this is aristocracy is called Adel, and it's very similar to the word edel, and he plays with these two words. So edel means, God, what's the best translation? Like high class, I guess, like sophisticated. And then, Adel is aristocracy. So in order to be the aristocrat, like this old notion of aristocracy being simply bloodline is moronic, he says. In order to be an aristocrat, in order to be Adel, you have to be edel. You have to actually be sophisticated and of higher virtue. And I love this, of course I love this, because he says that the central quality here is those who resist the filthy masses, but also resist the like kind of violent despot, which just feels like a kind of individualist denial of government.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like also the way that he's saying, many noblemen are needed, and noblemen of many kinds for nobility to exist. Like there's again, it's like this whole kind of there's no pattern to what an Übermensch could be. Assume he's basically talking about that here, right? The Übermensch. There's no like we're not looking for we're not talking about like a superior race of people who all have the same born qualities, for example. It's really about like in that it's like something that's open for anyone, which is why this is the whole kind of the book for everyone and no one kind of thing as well, probably. And this ultimate kind of opportunity that awaits you if you try to live this kind of way of life.
Very, very nice. I think, you picked up on another part that I didn't like. This, I don't know, point 11 is just so juicy, and it's a perfect example of like Nietzsche describing a billion things in like 10 sentences.
Yeah, 100%.
Next quote.
Should just do a Nietzsche podcast.
I mean, honestly.
Maybe we should do a spin-off Nietzsche podcast where we just... Honestly, that would actually fucking...
Well, I wish I could have this Nietzsche brain of creating all these new words he does. And he does it so sharply in German. Like, all the insults he has, they're so cunning, and they're so, to the point that, they're... I don't know. I just wish I could come up with shit like that,
I wanted to ask you, how does he create new words? Are they does he put existing words together? Is it like how does the meaning like
a lot of it is actually this like German just putting two nouns together. And if in German there's this grammatical thing where if you have two nouns after each other that become a new word, like for example in English, high school, high is separated with a space from school, right? It's high school. But in Germany that would be one word.
Yeah.
Because it's two nouns and but they're conjoined in meaning, so you put them together. What Nietzsche does usually is he does that,
Right.
except he uses a hyphen and then he still capitalizes the second word, which is kind of a way of doing that while like acknowledging that this is not really a word, but like a new word I just made, kind of thing. So he does that a lot. But then he also has
Right, I see.
the other way of simply doing like a really smart like inversion. So for example, I think this is in part 2. This is one of my favorite ones where he goes to like a bridge and there's all these inverted cripples, he calls them. And he talks about like people who have just like this poor guy, there's only one big mouth, like the whole human is lacking, and he's just a mouth kind of thing, basically someone who just talks shit, I guess. But by calling them an inverted cripple, it's like they're not someone, because a cripple is someone who is missing a part. These are people who are just one part. They have only one facet to them. That's all there is. So he does this really smart thing. Yeah, I don't know how exactly that fits in like language wise, but yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That really makes me want to learn German.
Don't.
It's really, I feel like there's so much.
Don't come.
I feel like there's so much to learn. Like, I feel like there would be so much more to appreciate about the text. I do feel like really there are some notes in this book as well, which really, it's funny because the translator at points is just kind of like, yeah, this is pretty much the best that we could do. Or like maybe I just went with this guy's translation here. Couldn't really figure out how to do this well. Like you should, and I was like reading this. I'm like, I just need to fucking read this in German. Like, you're not really selling this to me very well.
Yeah, to be fair, I mean, Nietzsche's like the only person who has ever really made me appreciate German. So, yeah, it's kind of sad almost. But if you think all German is like this, then sadly it's not.
Oh no,
I know,
that wasn't the
but
assumption.
all right, read the next quote, monkey.
So the next one is from part 19. This is a small section. Where the strong man is weak, where the noble man is too gentle, there it builds its loathsome nest. The parasite dwells where the great man possesses little sore places, which is the highest type of being, and which the lowest. The parasite is the lowest type, but he who is of the highest type nourishes the most parasites.
I mean, this is straight out of Atlas Shrugged, right? Like this whole, the great people being, really contributing to the whole system. And there's, the mass of people who are just parasites. I mean, it sounds really bad, but that I guess that's part of this provocative.
Well, I think it's not. I don't. He's not saying that the mass of people are parasites. He's saying that that people in those positions attract the most parasites, right? So
fair enough.
The example in Atlas Shrugged would be, the nationalization of the railway in Mexico, which is just it's a grab of private property by government under the auspice of like, this is for the people. No, it's not about the people themselves being parasites. It's about there being parasites attracted to greatness, and these parasites using this veil or this like excuse of we need to help the masses as a reason to steal this rail line.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that's a much better case for what he's trying to say. Yeah, so interesting, parasites, because in German, obviously, we have a word that means parasite. It's Parasiten. It's almost the same word. But that's not the word he uses here. He says Schmarotzer, which is more like because parasites is like a kind of biological word, right? Whereas schmarotzer is a more like derogatory social word, like calling someone a bum.
Right.
Yeah.
What could an equivalent be in English? Freeloader.
Yeah.
Kind of something like that. Yeah.
Coolio. Next quote.
Section 20 of the Law Tables chapter. O my brothers, am I then cruel? But I say, that which is falling should also be pushed. Ever think of today, it is falling, it is decaying. Who would support it? But I want to push it too. Do you know the delight that rolls stones into precipitous depths? These men of today, just see how they roll into my depths. I'm a prologue to better players, O my brothers. An example, follow my example. And him you do not teach to fly, teach to fall faster.
This is, I like this because it's very analogous to this modern political discussion about like white pill and black pill and Western civilization in trouble, and like, what do we do with the universities?
Yeah.
Are they so rotten to the core that we should just abandon them and burn them down? Or can we reform the universities? Or like, recently this is going to date this episode, but I guess it's dated anyway. I don't know. The what is it called? There's these two British guys, Constantine Kissin and Francis Foster, and I think they have like a polit podcast about like free speech and whatever. And I think
I think it is.
I think it is.
I haven't
yeah.
watched it, but I'm aware of the constant.
Yeah, to be honest, like not to like call anyone out or like say I'm so great, but I think their takes are generally like very mid, and like they are kind of like people pleasers in a way. Like that, I don't think they have really super like extreme or like super well thought out viewpoints, but they're just kind of facilitating like free speech and like, let's talk about these issues and blah blah blah. And they're obviously not happy with the way that the UK is going and just kind of cracking down on free speech more and more. And I was listening to this Francis Foster guy on someone else's podcast. I can't remember who it was, to be honest, but he mentioned like, I've been liking the UK, and we can say this about any system, like, I like the good parts of the system, but it's come to a point where it's just so rotten. And it's not like America, where people are kind of rebelling against wokeism and knocking down free speech. But in the UK, it just kind of seems like generally most people want this, and like this whole non-crime hate incident stuff, and like actually putting people in prison for Facebook posts and stuff, like it's just getting more and more, and there's no sign of this reversing. So I think this guy finally left the UK, and just reading this part made me remember that, like, what exactly is that point where you should say like, whatever that is falling, you might as well push it? Like, how? Because obviously you don't want to ruin something if it's just a little damaged. So it's Nietzsche kind of says a very general thing here. Oh yeah, something that's already falling, might as well push it. But what is the principle here exactly? Like, when do we really determine that? Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing in the Of Passing By chapter, where he says, where one can no longer love, one should pass by. I had the same question reading that. It's like, when do you know the right time is to leave something? I thought about that in terms of like relationships. When does a relationship stop becoming worthwhile, and when is a relationship something that you should discard? And I think this isn't compatible with these earlier kind of discussion about commitment and things like that. So, and yeah, it's like, where do you draw this line? Zarathustra doesn't want you to roam, but at the same time, he doesn't want you to, he wants you to help things fall faster if they're already falling. So how do you find that point? And I mean, it's, you know, I think he would say that it's not for me to tell you that. But I guess, you know, these are just the parameters of existence that you need to be aware of as you live your life. I think that's basically, that's the overarching point here, is that it's either this or it's this.
Very good, very good. We come to point 24.
Section 24. Your marriage contracting. See it is not a bad contracting. You have decided too quickly. From that follows breakup of marriage. And yet rather breakup of marriage than bending of marriage, lying in marriage. A woman said to me, "True, I broke up my marriage, but first my marriage broke me up." I've always found the badly paired to be the most revengeful. They make everybody suffer for the fact that they are no longer single. For that reason, I want honest people to say to one another, "We love each other. Let us see to it that we stay in love. Or shall our promise be a mistake? Allow us a term and a little marriage to see if we are fit for the great marriage. It is a big thing always to be with another." Thus I counsel all honest people, and what would be my love for the Superman and for everything to come if I should counsel and speak otherwise? To propagate yourselves, not only forward but upward, may the garden of marriage assist you, O my brothers.
The only reason why I picked out this quote is because it's so completely vanilla. Like there's nothing extreme or anything about this. And, you know, we always have discussions about Nietzsche, like, oh, he's this, you know, very hardcore guy, and like, but actually his personal life was not very fulfilled with women, and he had like a unrequited love. And, you know, we have, you know, in both left-wing and right-wing circles, people pick up Nietzsche, and I guess in, you know, after this, in the whole red pill thing, it's like, oh, marriage is toxic, and, you know, abandon all, you know, conventional ideas of marriage. So, you know, the question, you know, so what Nietzsche, who is this extreme quote unquote guy, who is this like, embrace your, you know, masculinity or whatever, or, you know, become strong, don't be weak. What does he say about marriage? What is the most vanilla fucking take ever? Like, you couldn't come up with a more vanilla take of marriage. It's like, yeah, don't lie, but also don't get married too early. But, you know, marriage is not a bad thing. So all you honest guys, just be honest and get married, and, you know, make it something that's not just for yourself, but also something greater. Just, you know, maybe children or whatever. So, you know, it's like the most like obvious take on marriage. And I think you mentioned this earlier of how really at the end of the day, Nietzsche's Übermensched allows for a grander plurality of options than a lot of these things that he seems so, you know, vehemently to deny. Like, you know, I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. You know, it's, I mean, it just seems like quite a normal
exactly
thing, what he's saying. It's nothing like particularly controversial. It is quite nice as well. It strikes me as just kind of like, he's not shitting on anyone, he's not breaking anything down, he's just kind of being like, yeah, this might be nice, this might be a good thing for you. Sometime, you know, it might not work out. I don't, you know, it's something that you should take seriously if you do want to do it. So yeah. Exactly.
Okay, sorry, that's it.
That's okay.
I've got.
So section 29.
Is that the one I've actually got another point before that, and you don't have to read it, but
okay.
He talks about, in section 26, he talks about the good, like as in people, the good guys, and kind of saying that it's the good guys are kind of the beginning of the end, and it's really the good guys who prevent progress. And at first I just kind of took this like, oh, this is another one of those Nietzschean, like he's just kind of trying to be shocking. So like just saying the good guys are really the bad guys, like haha, Nietzsche goes again, inverts everything. But no, I really thought about what he was actually saying here, like the the good guys being in the way of progress, which in German Fortschritt sounds less political. Like in English, if you think of progress, you think of like progressiveness, which is, it doesn't have that connotation in German. It just kind of means advancing. And so I thought, like, why would the good guys be against advancing in this context of moral values, and kind of creating new morals as well? And obviously, if you're the top dog, right, in the status quo hierarchy of values, if you are the good guy, if you're living according to the morals of the society and you're in the top class, obviously someone trying to make new values, that threatens your position, right? It's like a very incentive based like situation you're in. Like by being the good guy, you're automatically incentivized to stop progress on the kind of more on the philosophical front, right? You wouldn't want any other values to come into being, because maybe then you're not the good guy anymore.
Right. Yeah. I see what you're saying. That's a really good, interesting point. Yeah. So let me just read it. "O my brothers, with whom does the greatest danger for the whole human future lie? It is not with the good and just, with those who say and feel in their hearts, we already know what is good and just. We possess it too. Woe to those who are still searching for it. And whatever harm the wicked may do, the harm the good do is the most harmful harm. And whatever harm the world calumniators may do, the harm the good do is the most harmful harm. O my brothers, someone who once looked into the heart of the good and just said, they are the Pharisees, but he was not understood. The good and just themselves could not understand him. Their spirit is imprisoned in their good conscience. The stupidity of the good is unfathomably clever. But it is the truth. The good have to be Pharisees. They have no choice. Etc. Etc. This is quite a good bit. The good cannot create. They are always the beginning of the end.
And
that's quite an interesting line.
Yeah, it also says like, who do they hate the most? The creator is who they hate the most. He who breaks the old tables and, writes new ones. So, that's kind of like this. That's why I talked about progress, right? Like he who creates new things, that's who they really hate.
Yeah. Taggart Steele. Spoiler alert. So, section 29. Why so hard, the charcoal once said to the diamond, for are we not close relations? Why so soft, O my brothers, thus I ask you, for are you not my brothers?
Yeah, the reason I made you read this is just because I just like the language and the analogy here. Obviously coal, being compressed to diamonds, kind of being related, but also being opposites, in their qualities. And, and he takes this like, what if you outshine, I guess, others, or if you're like serious, and especially in, I think this is actually more negative in like English than Japanese. I was thinking of Japanese, and even in English, people say like, oh, why so serious? Or like, don't take things too seriously, and all this like, the kid who studies most and who gets the good grades always gets bullied, kind of thing. And, you know, the
Yeah.
the Zarathustra response is, you know, why so soft? You know, not why I'm so hard. Why the
Yeah.
fuck are you so soft?
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's clear to me how, you know, if you take this book, you know, I often see like Nietzsche quotes like around. I used to see them like around on the internet here and there, and what I think is funny, or something that you kind of have to bear in mind with Zarathustra, is it's not just like a book of quotes, because it's not just like you can take a quote out and it will by itself hold every answer and angle to Zarathustra's philosophy. So when you have a quote like this, which is like, why so hard, why so soft, it's, how do I say,
Viagra.
how I don't think that Zarathustra is saying that that hardness is necessarily what you need to be. As in like cold, unloving, unemotional, like kind of thing, right? But you could kind of interpret that from this.
Yeah.
That from some kind of like, you know, gym bro kind of like productivity thing, like having this quote on your like Instagram page or something. Like, you have to be hard.
You know,
like a Joe Rogan-esque, like hard times make hard, like tough times make tough men kind of thing.
That's not how the quote goes, but the
hard times create hard men.
No, it's hard
Isn't
times
it?
create. Wait, what is it? But it's hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create bad times. But
yeah, okay.
All
so
right,
I said hard
all right,
times create
calm
hard
down.
men.
Okay, you were kind of
I'm sorry, I
right.
should have said
Nibble,
strong
nibble.
men. I'm sorry.
Why so soft, bro? No, but that's kind of why I picked the vanilla take on marriage as well, to just kind of contrast that, right? Because you have all these like, you know, be hard, you know, be strong,
Yeah.
fuck the weak, fuck
Right.
parasites, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that you have to like fucking go like apeshit berserk and, you know, this like wake up at 5, like drink 15 protein shakes, like, you know, David Goggins your way up a mountain kind of thing. You exactly, don't speak to women. Like, you can still have a good life and have a meaningful relationship, and you can still get married and appreciate Nietzsche. You don't have to like be this caricature of a like this cartoon Superman kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Next quote.
Okay, so next quote. Now we're in the convalescent chapter. This is in part 2, section 2. When the great man cries out, straightway the little man comes running. His tongue is hanging from his mouth with lasciviousness. He, however, calls it his pity.
Oh, so this is interesting, translator, huh? First of all, lasciviousness. This is, in German, it's Lüstern, which, I mean, basically it's like lust.
It's lasciviousness. My bad.
Okay.
Lasciviousness.
I mean, yeah, in German it feels more like you're kind of lusting for the bad, like the fact that this great man cried out, like something bad happened to them, and the little guy comes running, oh, I'll help you, I'll pity you, whatever. But really, he's kind of lusting for this. He can't help himself. Like, he's so happy this great man fell, and he's able to help him back up the horse or whatever. So, second thing, it actually says pity in the English here. It still is Mitleid in Germany. So in German, it's still the same compassion we were talking about earlier. Yeah.
Really? That's annoying. I'm really not that happy with this translation, to be honest. I think there's lots of...
Well, that's kind of why I picked
weird,
this.
Like...
Because, we're adding yet another facet of smearing poopy onto this Mitleid, onto this compassion concept. Like, we've discussed earlier a bunch of ways in which it sucks, but now we add this another image of not only are there all these problems with giving charity because you're only doing it for yourself, maybe you just want to be noticed, maybe you're not really helping, all this stuff, but also it creates this incentive where, if you're the one out giving charity, well, you want everyone to be in need of charity, right? Like, and this is this whole libertarian welfare state thing as well. Like, well, if you create a government bureaucracy with that, like the welfare state, which a bunch of people whose jobs are to administer, like, helping the poor, their biggest incentive is going to be to make sure that there's always going to be a class of the poor. Otherwise, they become superfluous. And so, this kind of Mitleid or compassion or pity here portrayed like someone, lustfully running to the guy who just fell down and be like, I'll help you out. Like, love that.
Yeah. Okay, so to read, it was a bit annoyed because I actually have quite a lot of quotes from the last chapter on my Kindle, but I didn't have time to put them on my computer beforehand. But let me read from your quotes. For your animals know well, O Zarathustra, who you are and must become. Behold, you were the teacher of the eternal recurrence. That is now your destiny. That you have to be the first to teach this doctrine. How should this great destiny not also be your greatest danger and sickness? Behold, we know what you teach, that all things recur eternally, and we ourselves with them, and that we have already existed an infinite number of times before, and all things with us. You teach that there is a great year of becoming, a colossus of a year. This year must, like an hourglass, turn itself over again and again, so that it may run down and run out anew, so that all these years resemble one another, in the greatest things and in the smallest, so that we ourselves resemble ourselves in each great year, in the greatest things and in the smallest.
Yeah, again, we come back to this eternal reoccurrence theme, and this is just kind of confusing me more, to be honest, because now we're back to this kind of more like physics interpretation of literally time repeating, even though we've previously established that, just saying haha time is a circle is not the way to go. So I don't know if we're going to crack this nut, to be honest. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, for sure. I actually have this quote highlighted on my iPod as well, my Kindle, that is, which is cool, and the following quote as well. I don't know what to make of it. It is just weird that like this eternal recurrence idea would come out so much. Why even talk about it anyway? There's got to be something to it, right? Like, but I feel like everything about this book would have made more sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like, everything else kind of fits in together, but this kind of seems to contradict other things. So
Yeah, and whilst with like Faust, for example, there feels like there's quite a lot of ego going into Faust, which is why he has these, colossal tangent chapters where he's just talking about, Greek mythology, characters from Greek mythology. But, Nietzsche feels so much more intentional, even intentional, like super intentional in his writing. Like when you think about all like the playing on words in German and stuff like that, and like you said, the new words that he comes up with. But yeah, so it kind of sets up this expectation where you kind of think he's doing everything with intention. So why is there this like idea that keeps recurring that doesn't seem to really make sense within the broader context of like the broader teachings of Zarathustra?
Again, though, I think, isn't this his animals talking? Or is this actually him talking, thinking what his animals would say?
These are the animals talking,
yeah,
right?
so this could be another one of those, like, what if this is actually not really it? Because a lot of the time the animals do seem to lead him, but I think there have been moments in the past where he's kind of denied them as well.
Right. That's a fair point, actually. Yeah, maybe you're right there. Anyway, let's go to the next quote. This is the final quote we have for today. But as the complex of causes in which I am entangled will recur, it will create me again. I myself am part of these causes of the eternal recurrence. I shall return with this sun, with this earth, with this eagle, with this serpent, not to a new life or a better life or a similar life. I shall return eternally to this identical and self-same life, in the greatest things and in the smallest, to teach once more the eternal recurrence of all things. To speak once more the teaching of the great noontide of earth and man, to tell man of the Superman once more. I spoke my teaching, I broke upon my teaching, thus my eternal fate will have it, as prophet do I perish. Now the hour has come when he who is going down shall bless himself. Thus ends Zarathustra's Zarathustra's downgoing.
Again, I want you to note that this is also the animals talking. So we're still in a like previous
right, yeah,
section where this is the animals kind of speculating what Zarathustra would say, I guess. And he kind of goes into this deep sleep or something, and they just kind of leave him alone. But yeah, this eternal reoccurrence thing more and more just sounds like reincarnation or like literally repeating time. So we're gonna have to do some digging for episode 4. Stay tuned for that. To really, I think that has to be your mission, to really understand this recurrence thing, and why it contradicts other ideas in Zarathustra. Like, how can you have eternal reoccurrence and self-responsibility or like autonomy?
Yeah, because you can kind of deal with the contradictions and the lack of kind of rationale for the anti-rational kind of thing, but this is about like the real like essential like why are you living kind of question. And it's so much harder to kind of like, it has such bigger, feels like it has way bigger implications for the rest of the worldview, and it also feels the least necessary of everything. But yeah, we need to figure this out. We need to figure this out as much as go as far into it as we can. And that's what we will try and do in episode 4. So, final thoughts. Yeah. Any final thoughts? Any final things to say about this part?
Yeah, again, I'm just glad we came back to it. I'm blown away again by language and by the depth of analysis. I didn't really remember, to be honest, what part 3 was about, and I think it's maybe the one of more like softer parts, or the more like forgettable parts of this book. But there's no dearth of content if you look for it. So yeah, excited to finish this up.
Yeah, I remember this part being the kind of the introduction to eternal recurrence, or like at least like the most substantial section on eternal recurrence. And I think probably because when I first read it, nothing about it was fully clear to me. That, yeah, like you, this kind of chapter wasn't really particularly high up in my list, in my memory, really. I think a lot of the, there are chapters in this which, there are sections in this which, point back to older things. I really like, so that in that sense there is a lot of stuff that isn't particularly new, but I do really love how we kind of discovered in this discussion how the usage of like day and night cycles as well, and those sorts of like natural phenomena and stuff, how they're used in the writing, and just generally to kind of strengthen these ideas that he's talking about. So yeah, I loved it. I'm really excited to get into part 4 and to just kind of like close this thing off. Another thing that's probably worth mentioning is that we are planning on doing another Nietzsche episode, which will be a 2-parter. At this point, at least, we're thinking 2 parts. Might end up being more. You never know how it's going to be with Nietzsche. We've done over 3 hours on just one part of this book, so we'll see. But we'll be doing The Will to Power, which is a book I'm really excited to read. And this will be before the Nietzsche podcast officially opens. But we'll let you know when that happens.
The Uber boys.
Uber boys.
All right.
Thanks for listening,
Good
everyone.
night, guys.
Good night. Bye-bye.